Budget and Finance Committee. We have a quorum. We have Mr. Smith, Mr. Zine, Mr. Rosenthal, Mr. Koretz, Ms. Perry, and myself, Bernard Parks, as chair, and we have Mr. Weezer. What we're going to do, because this process has gone over the last week or so, and we've had significant amount of public comment, we're going to reduce the public comment to 1 minute per person, and we also will deal, anyone that's put in their cards, we're going to have 1 period of public comment before we get into discussion of the CLA's report, which we've asked them to come back today. And the way we're going to organize this is that we have a variety of cards, probably about 8 or 10 of them, in which people have different issues regarding the budget. We're going to bring them forward for them to talk on their particular issue for 1 minute. We have literally several dozen cards just dealing with the issue of the grid funding. We are not going to be able to go through every card, but we will allot a minimum amount of time that those come in and speak for that 1 minute, and we will cut off public comment at the conclusion, and those that did not get an opportunity, we will put your card in file, because we've had, again, numerous days and numerous opportunities for public comment before today's hearing. And what's most important today is to go through the CLA's report after their significant amount of effort to sit through these hearings and compile a report today. This report will go to the City Council and be presented on this Friday. It will not be discussed in any detail, but the following Monday at 9 o'clock, we will start the budget hearings in the City Council. So that's our game plan for today. And what I'll do is on these issues is call up a number of names. We'll ask you to come up to the podium, and that we not end up wasting a lot of time with people walking back and forth to their seats. So when I call up these names, if you all come and line up into the at the podium, and also before speaking, if you give your name, so we make sure that we are accounting for all of the cards. So thank you very much. Let me get started on the public comment. Luann Allard, Jim McQuiston, Roy Stone, Harry Gambill. If those four would come up, and then we'll continue calling names. Start out.
Hi, my name is Luann Allard, and I'm from Hillside Village Property Owners Association. We've met with you before regarding our Fire Station 16. We know that we're on the outskirts of the city, and we don't have backup that's close enough by us. Our closest station is 3 to 4 miles away. If that station is browned out, then we have to wait 10 to 15 minutes for another station to come to our services. I just want to remind you that all of you had supported not cutting the fire station budget or cutting the paramedics from any of this from the budget, and I hope that you'll vote to make sure that happens. Also want to keep the police nutrition as it is and not cut their budget also. Our safety is in your hands at this point.
Thank you. Next person, come on up to the microphone. Mr. McQuiston.
Jim McQuiston. You all have my copy of the analysis of the budget memos. It's very, very long. Probably would take me 2 hours to explain, but it's in detail because I think there's some very important points in there. One of my conclusions so far is, even if we do exactly what you people have talked about so far, and the mayor has talked about, we will still be short $200 million from actually the budget balancing. That means that we really have to roll up our sleeves a lot more. Those are big numbers, and little bitty nickel and dime recaptures are not going to make up $200 million. There's $60 million at least the police have to have. There's $40 million probably we have to give at least 25 or 30 to the fire department, and those are our public safety things. And the fire department is the most important of the public safety as far as the public is concerned.
Thank you, Mr. Quiston. Next, Mr. Horn, and, I'm sorry, Mr. Stone, Mr. Gamble, Mr. Horn, Richard Lowe.
Good afternoon. I hope that in your recommendation that you've remembered the importance of the library being the lifeblood to each of your communities, to be the department that you can be most proud of, most efficient department that provides services to every one of your members in your community and improves your communities. I hope that you have thought creatively on this budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Henry Gamble, Young Adult Librarian, Palisades Branch. I've appeared before each and one of you many times. I'm just here to underscore to do your best to preserve the library. We've told you how important it is. You know how important it is. Currently, we're reduced down to 850 staff members after ERIP and positions going away. That's down from 1,100. What concerns me beyond the 100 people being fired that this budget's being talked about is going into the charter funds, which we brought to your attention for the first time, $22 million in future. That's going to lay off even more people. So our libraries are going to go down to levels of 1930. That's not something I want to see. I don't think any of you want to see as well either. So please continue to be creative and work with us, with the Librarians Guild, with the Coalition of City Unions. We're the people that read to your children. We're the people that have programs for your teens. Thank you.
Thank you. And also Peter Wilson, Terrence Rice, and Paul Horn.
Yes, John Horn, LA Family Housing, Director of the Valley Shelter. I'm here representing LA Family Housing, express my support for LAHSA and the year-round shelter program for the homeless. Just to encourage you to keep that funding source for the year-round shelter program stable and to keep it at the same levels. This program provides a vital safety net for our homeless population, getting homeless people off of the streets and into transitional and permanent housing. Our program has a very large success rate of getting homeless people into permanent housing where they remain stable and no longer a drain on our public systems. So I ask that you keep the public funding for year-round shelter stable and keep it within the general fund. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Richard Lowe. I'm a product of the city, of its neighborhoods, its schools, its universities, and its streets. And more importantly, I'm a product of its child care system. My kids go to Eagle Rock Child Care Center, and they love the place. And they plan their day around what they're going to do after school when they get there. If I pick them up early, they get mad at me for ruining their fun. For my wife and I, as it was for my mother when I went to child care, this facility is a godsend. In a time when both parents must work to make ends meet, when employers ask for more sacrifices from their employees at the same time that they are cutting wages, a place where parents can leave their children safe and happy is a godsend. This is your task in this fiscal crisis, to preserve the fiscal tree by expert trimming, to cut in anticipation of growth. If you cut without thought to the future, you risk irreparable damage. What this council should be talking about is how to preserve this facility and others like it for the future, not how to dismantle it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Terrence Rice. I'm here also as a parent of two children who utilize the city's child care center in Eagle Rock. There are a lot of reasons to keep the center and child care center open in Eagle Rock. First, there's a need. According to the LA County website, 2006, there were 287 kids in zip code 90041 that had no child care. That was 2006. In my child care center alone, Eagle Rock, we have 100 families on the waiting list. Second, children receiving child care services basically have better outcomes on almost every measure than those attending school or park-based programs. For example, according to this 2006 U.S. Census, children receiving child care services at at child care centers watch 3%, had spent 3% of the time watching TV. 10% of the time, they did it at school-based or park-based centers. Also, they fared better in terms of grade level. 15% of them are on grade level versus 11% who are at school-based programs. Lots of reasons. My kid said to me yesterday, I talked to them last night, they said the reason they want to stay there is because the supervision is so good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Paul Horn. I'm also here to talk to you about the cuts to the child care programs.
Mr. Horn, let me just ask, was that Terrence Wright?
Rice.
Rice just before you?
Yes.
Okay.
Rice,
thank you.
R-I-C-E.
All right, thank you.
We've had a number of meetings in our community about cuts to this program. We feel that it's a public safety issue. These programs are as important as fire and police. Without them, our kids are going to be at risk, definitely more at risk. These programs service working families in the community. Most of our families, if not all of them, have two working parents. Without child care, we can't go to work. We can't spend money. We can't make money. We can't provide money for the coffers of city government and everything that makes the city run. With the budget cuts this year and schools being furloughed and days being shortened, we need these services even more. Most of these centers are filled to capacity, and we've talked about ways and means to make them operate not at a deficit but at a profit. I think it can be done. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next would be Pat McCosker, Evie Lowe, Edward Castaneda, Martin Martinez. If your name is called, please come up. We're going to cut off the non-grid cards with the stack that we have now, but please come up to the microphone when your name is called.
Thank you, council members. Pat McCosker, President, United Firefighters. Please save jobs, save services, and save money by, first of all, not laying off or furloughing any civilian workers. We ask that first. What we all do in this city contributes to public safety, so it's not just about fire and police, but about everybody. Secondly, please make it your next priority to end fire department brownouts before somebody gets killed. We've had some close calls in the fire department lately because of late arriving closed companies, browned out fire companies. I'm fearful that we're going to have a firefighter killed if we don't end these brownouts. Please do it by bringing new revenue, crediting us for the revenue that we bring in. You've got before you ambulance billing changes proposed. Please take those seriously and do that. Please use whatever additional revenue can be culled from this budget. And then beyond that, we're prepared to make other sacrifices. But the first priority has to be ending these brownouts, again, before the public suffers anymore and before we have a line-of-duty death because of delayed fire company response. Thank you.
Hi, Evie Lowe and Crystal Crandall with Child and Family Guidance, the non-grid program. We are the only gang reduction program in the West Valley, and we ask you not to cut our funds so that we can keep working with the children in the West Valley, because
in the time that we've been providing the prevention services in the West Valley, we've seen a decrease in truancy with the clients we've been working with, some off probation, improvement in school attendance and grades, more parent involvement, and better communication with LAPD through our Safe Passages program. We feel it's really vital as the West Valley area has one of the most notorious gangs. It's the biggest concern in the community. We pulled community members in March when we had a March for Kids, and that was the number one concern was gangs in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, I'm Edward Castaneda, and I'm a former youth squad member from Cypress Park last summer, and I'm here on behalf to ask for no cuts on the gang reduction program. Over this summer, I saw most of the community came together and had fun, and we had almost no problems. Everybody shared together the sports and the food, and we just all came together over the summer, and we really had no problems, and I hadn't seen a summer like that for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you. The last card on non-grid. Let me just say, when we start the grid comments, if you applaud, you'll be eating into people's speaking time. So if you can restrain yourself, we'd appreciate it. The last card on the non-grid will be Sylvia Ramirez, who's concerned about child care. And then we'll start the prevention and intervention and grid cards right after that, and we'll set aside 1/2 hour where we can get 1 minute per person. All those that cannot be heard during that half hour, we will put your card in file. Also be aware that it's not a necessity that you repeat what may have been said before you. So do we have Sylvia Ramirez? Okay, that's a closing public comment on items that do not address the grid. We will now go into, and we can keep track of that, Lorraine, a half hour. We had the Martin Martinez, Edward Rojas, Marie Ann Balthart, and these are, I'm reading these as we received them. Brandon Jackson, so if you can come up. Again, Martin Martinez, Edwin Rojas, Marie Ann Balthar, and Brandon Jackson.
My name is Brandon Jackson. I'm a part of the Youth Justice Coalition, and our school, we recently moved to Inglewood, and we're in the middle of a couple of different neighborhoods, and our gang intervention workers make it safe for us right there, to and from school, at the bus stops. And I don't know, I just think that it's very important that we have them around our community because they know a little bit more than we do about, the neighborhoods and things like that. So they keep the peace around there, and I'm glad that they're working with us around our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Next person, come on up.
Hello, my name is Marie Ann Balthard, and I just want to say that I think that the program for the grid should continue, and there shouldn't be any cuts. There's been I've seen great progress in the schools and being led into the schools, and also in learning centers. Our intervention workers and our case managers work very hard. The directors work very hard to try to make everything right for the communities. And I just telling you from how I feel that it should be that they deserve to have more so that they can do more, and because it is really needed. So thank you.
Thank you. Let me ask again, for those that are called, come right up to the podium so we'll not waste time you walking up to the front. Martin Martinez, Edwin Rojas, Kim McGill, Emily Walker. Go ahead.
I'm Sylvia Ramirez. I'm speaking for the child care cuts.
Okay, what is your name?
My name is Sylvia Ramirez.
Okay.
The child care offers and exposes my children and my grandchildren to cultural activities, performing arts, academic, science. Eliminating this program, I think would be really bad because all the teachers, aides, and all staff has child care units, not just some like Rec and Parks does. So I would hope that you would reconsider not cutting the child care funds. Thank you.
Next.
Hi, my name is Wendy Melendez, and I'm doing community service at Chuco Justice Center.
What is your name, ma'am?
Wendy Melendez.
Okay, did we call you? I don't think we called you. Who was?
I'm speaking for Emily.
Okay, you can't speak for Emily. You have to fill out a card for yourself. Okay, is Emily here?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Emily Walker, and I'm with the Youth Justice Coalition, and I want to speak against you cutting the budget for the gang intervention workers. I feel they're much needed in our communities for our youth because for me, I'd rather talk to a gang, somebody who already been through what I'm going through than to talk to somebody else who don't even know what they're talking about, just know what they know. They care about the community and our youth and our futures because they know what's out there and what's to be brought our way, and I just hope that you keep them around. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Kim McGill. I'm an organizer at the Youth Justice Coalition. Our center is located on the border between South Central Los Angeles and Inglewood, 1 block west of Florence and Crenshaw. We're between 4 neighborhoods, and when we moved in, those 4 neighborhoods had a lot of altercations and shootings between each other. Since that time, we've had not a single bodily injury, not a single shooting or stabbing, 4 fights that were immediately squashed, and no retaliation or even harsh words have occurred since. We've never had to call the police. We've had 2 of our members stabbed not at the center but in their home communities. 1 member killed in his home community, 2 family members killed, but no retaliation by those young people or their families due to those incidents. What I'm talking about today is really a love letter, a great thank you to the gang intervention workers that hold down peace in our space. They have responded within minutes anytime one of our members is hit up, pocket checked, or threatened in any way. They have taken care of any retaliatory or threatening graffiti. They have addressed all conflicts between young people in our center and in the community. They have spent hundreds of hours counseling youth and connecting them to jobs. Please, for the sake of our center and all the centers across Los Angeles, maintain all the funding and increase it 100 times for gang intervention.
Thank you very much. We'll call... We call Martin Martinez, 3rd time, Edward Rojas, so we'll put those in file. Is it Credi Parish from the Youth Justice Coalition, Henry Sandoval, Bart Trevino, Steve Martinez, Cesar Calderon. What is your name, ma'am?
Kruti Parekh.
Okay, did you put in a, okay, there you go. Right on top, okay.
That's the correct pronunciation.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Unfortunately, this is in our altar. These are all the stolen lives that have been taken in our streets. I work for the Youth Justice Coalition. I'm the administrator for our high school there. We were practically forced to have a high school because young people were not safe in going to other schools. We work strongly in partnership with gang intervention workers. We're an active member of Ceasefire, and we just really need them in our streets, in our communities. Young people tell us every day how effective it is and how the trust that they have in the gang intervention workers, unfortunately, the police does not have the same trust. Unfortunately, young people don't think that the police care about them, yet gang intervention workers are able to do the work of the police 100-fold. So we just want to encourage you to maintain the budget, and as Ms. Kim McGill stated, please increase it 1,000-fold. Thank you.
Mr. Sandoval, Bart Trevino, Steve Martinez, and Cesar Calderon.
My name is Henry Sandoval. I'm a member from the YJC, the Youth Justice Coalition, a community-based organization. When I first heard that the gang intervention program was going to be cut, I thought, why would they cut off something that is really important? It's a really important program for the youth in the city of Los Angeles. The gang intervention program has helped many of gang members realize that it's not worth following the path they're facing. I know that gang members will not just get advice from anybody when they're in a gang. They look up to their elders, in other words, the OGs, and gang intervention workers are OGs that are people who've been through it and seen it all, and in the end, they realized it was all going in a negative path. Gang intervention workers have helped many of the students that go to my school, Free LA High School, back on track, and now are working for a brighter future for themselves and their families. Why take away something that helps the community? The police protects and serves by incarcerating the youth who make mistakes, but gang intervention workers help the youth realize their mistakes and help them get back on track. When police incarcerate the youth, it's temporary. Thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Cesar Calderon, and I represent Solid Enrichment Action. I'm the executive director. We are the lead agency for Florence Graham, Newton, Boyle Heights, El Sereno, Lincoln Heights, and Ramona. And I'm here to express my opposition to any cuts to gang intervention contracts. 10% represents about $200,000 per agency and about five gang intervention workers and case managers. And as you all know, there have been major cuts at the state, county, and city level, which has impacted libraries, parks, swimming pools, and after-school programs. Gang intervention has become an essential and vital service in intervention, containment, and prevention of crime. We cannot just take away things from our youth and children and not give them something back, because if we are not there for them, there will be thousands of gang members ready for them to fill the gaps. So I'm inviting you that instead of considering funding cuts, that we consider an increase in this program, because it's vital service for the community.
Good afternoon. My name is Bart Trevino. I'm the program director for the GRID program with New Directions for Youth in the San Fernando Valley, servicing Panorama City. I'm here to encourage the council members not to make any cuts, because this money also prevents youth from being incarcerated. This money also helps fund youth who have no dollars to afford counseling service, academic services, parenting education for parents. Our agency serves over 150 youth every month in preventing gangs and violence in our communities, with parenting instructors who also work closely with their families. If the services are discontinued due to a budget crisis or reduced in any fashion, this community will be at even a higher risk to gang violence. So I'm encouraging the council members to not make any cuts and to continue funding a program as vital as the GRID program. Thank you.
Mr. Martinez, we also have Ellen Sanchez, Ricardo Mora, and Stan Mohammed.
Ready?
You can start.
Hello, I'm Steve Martinez, NDY. You know, I just want to, nobody likes to see their budgets cut. But let's look at this. You have high unemployment. You got parents whose hours are being cut from 30 to 18 hours a week. Where do you think those children go to? They come to the social programs that are here today. They come to us. We are the ones standing our ground, providing these needed services. This is the last place where the city should be attempting to cut, because as unemployment rises, us being in a recession, they're coming to these good agencies that are here today. So I'm asking you, please, when you're looking at, it's good to cut waste, but when the social programs who are protecting children and helping the mothers, especially single mothers out here in the city of LA, those are the last people you want to cut. Those are the ones who want to expand and help more, because they're the ones more in need throughout this time of real need in the city, this time of crisis for the city of LA. So I really urge you, please do not cut any of the GRID programs or agencies within the city, because believe me, more parents are coming out to every one of the people here today. Thank you.
Steve Martinez, Ellen Sanchez, Ricardo Mora, and San Mohammed.
My name is Ricardo Mora. I stand here, I represent the Helper Foundation Gang Intervention. I stand here today in awe, because usually when I come before these settings, it's a parole board or a criminal judge. But as a direct result of my involvement with the gang intervention that intervened in my own personal life, I saw fit to continue that process and that road of recovery and change. It is vitally important, not only to myself, but to the community and the youth that we serve, to continue this process of change and of growth, because it has empowered me to live a productive life and to promote that peace, that mentality of peace and change into my community, directly to those that I serve. I implore this committee to not consider the cuts, but to consider the fact that without this, there would be more people that would be coming before parole boards and criminal courts. So I really appreciate this consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ellen Sanchez, and I'm the Director of Community Outreach at the Violence Intervention Program. We're the lead agency for the prevention program of GRID in the Ramona Gardens zone, Hollenbeck zone. Our subcontractors in that work are Legacy LA and Barrio Action in El Sereno. And of course, I'm here to ask you to continue the funding and to fully fund it and consider actually increasing the funding, as this is one of the most cost-effective investments you can possibly make. In the 2 years of the program, we have seen absolutely that we are able to engage young people who are on the cusp of joining gangs in a program that is opening up new possibilities for their lives that they had no idea were possible before, and turning their lives around.
Thank you.
Is that really 1 minute? Well,
maybe a little more now.
okay, I just want to say that the GRID office has been a true partner in really trying to figure this out and do something new, and that innovation is messy, but it's working, and to please continue to fund
Thank you
it.
very much. For those, when you come up to the podium, there's a timer right there in front of you that will let you know.
Yeah, well-
Okay? Thank you.
Okay.
Brenda Shockley, Mr. Mohammed, come on up. Brenda Shockley, Gerald Cavett, Jose Escueda.
Good evening. My name is Stan Mohammed. I'm the Executive Director of the Helper Foundation, also known as Venice 2000. I stand here because my heart is heavy, and I'm going to lend my voice to those who's been killed to gang violence. I don't know if you guys realize, but we're at war. And for you all to be our representatives and not even consider not only the funding that we currently have, but it should be increased. But we're at war to save the lives of our people and the minds of our people. And for us to come in front of you to ask and to plead and to possibly even beg not to cut the funding is really a disrespect. So I hope tonight when you lay down, you think about all the African-American men and women and all the Latino men and women who's been killed to this senseless violence here in the city of Los Angeles. This is the gang capital of the country. And we should not even have to be in the chamber asking you all to consider maintaining the funding that we have. Right now, the funding is not even where it should be, to be honest with you. But we have to come in front of our elected officials and even ask to maintain the funding, and it's really a disrespect. But when you lay down tonight, think about all those young people who's been killed to violence. Thank you.
Brenda?
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Shockley. I'm the president of Community Build. We are the lead agency for the GRID for both the prevention and intervention in Council District 8. I come to you asking that the funding be retained because this population, the families and the youth that we serve, are already taking a cut. They have no summer school, their library privileges will be reduced, their rec and parks will be reduced, and our agency, like the other agencies in the GRID, are sort of the last place of resort for the youth of families that are facing more than twice the unemployment rate of this city and the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cavett, Jose Escueda, Father Stan Bosch, Sam Oliva, and Ricky Hurtado.
Good afternoon. My name is Jose Esqueda. I'm the Director of Youth and Family Programs for ADAP, serving the 772 GRID Prevention Services. And I'm here before you, like the rest of my colleagues, to urge you not to cut the budget. Our families are in great need, in great desperation. We have come this far. We've been only in service for a year, and now you're planning to cut us? Give us a chance. Give us a chance to do something great. We've been doing services in this community for over 35 years. The GRID program is one of the most outstanding programs I've seen yet. We've done an outstanding job during the summer at Harvard Park. We're doing a fantastic job at Hyde Park, at Park View, and it's just an awe to hear that we're going to be cut. All I'm saying is just give us a chance.
How you doing? My name is Joe Cavett. I'm director of a Chapter 2 Community Intervention Program. I'm here to say that we fight for our kids out here on the street that's targeted from 13 to 25 for failure or death. And I'm not sure how serious everybody takes that. Law enforcement does a great job with arresting the people that need to be arrested, but we believe that everybody don't have to wind up in prison for the rest of their life from 14 to age of 25 out of our communities. We here to help save the lives and change the way our community deals with these issues. Law enforcement, other workers, it's not their job to do some of the work that we do. We do our job, and we try to do it good, and we're doing it at a rate that we can't stand for it to be cut. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Oliva, and I'm here to ask you to not cut the budget. We really need this program. I was an active gang member. With this program, it's not only a program, but it has become my family. And they've been there for me. I've been stabbed, I've been shot, jumped, all this stuff. And I'm just asking you, please do not cut this program off and this budget. We really need this. The community really needs it, and everybody really needs it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Father Stan Bosch, psychotherapist and supervisor for 4 of SEA's GRID projects. As pastor for 24 years in areas like East Los Angeles, Compton, and South Los Angeles, I watched what was something of a structural isolation between our neighborhoods, between even our churches, and certainly between our cities. Having buried myriads of young men and women over those years, and having watched the emergence of gang intervention become professionalized, men and women who had been wounded, filled with hatred, becoming wounded healers, I'm convinced that these men and women that are here today are representing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lives that are being saved. I pray that you continue to fund what we're doing in the name of our loving God, in the name of the city.
My name is Enrique Hurtado, Executive Director for Aztecs Rising. And again, I'm in opposition of the cut. You all know how good work these guys do and how many lives they're saving. You got everybody here, all the CBOs, directors, gang interventionists, the people out there that are in the front lines, in the trenches, you could say, not only wearing one hat, but becoming fathers, mentors, job developers, case managers, you name it. They do everything just to save those kids. So like that, they don't go through the same thing that, or get incarcerated, die, or whatever, getting shot. You all know that the good work that they're doing, and I'm here to plead for you guys not to cut the GRID programs. The work is being done. The work is being done. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Lourdes Coza, Miguel Morales, Elijah Phillips, Mario Castro.
Hello, I'm Lourdes Caracosa with Alma Family Services. We are the lead agency for the prevention program in Boyle Heights. I am here today representing not just our program and our agency, but the community as well, because this community has seen the benefits of an integrated program such as GRID through prevention intervention. Our schools are benefiting from it, our students and our families. The communication between our families has improved. They're being given the tools for parenting through our partners such as PAL, mentoring, Girls Today, Women Tomorrow, and to take away these tools from our families is to assist in the violence that takes place in our city. We are providing the mentoring, giving them the example of being successful citizens for the city of LA. They're proud of their city. Please help us to continue to give them this assistance.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Miguel Ángel Morales y vengo representando a
Hold on just a minute.
Amac Service.
Hold on just a minute. Let's get to my interpret. They'll be right there.
Hello.
Ok, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Miguel Ángel Morales y vengo en representación de Almas Community Service.
You're going to have to give her a chance to interpret.
Mi nombre es Miguel Ángel Morales
My name is Miguel Ángel Morales,
y vengo de Almas Community Service.
and I'm here from Almas Community Service.
A enfatizarles que he recibido buenos servicios de esta comunidad
I want to emphasize that I have received good services from this community,
y entre todos ustedes quiero enfatizar lo importante que son las criaturas.
and I would like to emphasize the importance of these children,
Que en este caso podrían ser sus hijos, los míos y los de los demás vecinos.
that in this case could be my children, your children, or the children of your neighbors.
Por lo tanto, tenemos que poner atención en ellos y continuar con estos servicios.
And therefore, we have to pay attention to them and keep receiving these services.
Y trabajando juntos lograremos algo con ellos.
And by working together, we'll be able to get something good out of it.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Just hold on for a second so she can get back in her seat there.
Good afternoon. My name is Mario Castro, and I work for the 77th District, 77-2. I'm actually a case manager, and I'm a product of my environment. It was a program like this that helped change my life. I can honestly say to you guys today that if it weren't for programs like these, I wouldn't be here. I went to UC Berkeley. I would have been dead. I would have been in a gang. I would have been shot. Multiple of those things would have happened. Please, don't cut the budget. How am I supposed to go home to these families and tell them, hey, there's no funding for this program. Give us a year. We need more money for this program. Please don't send me home and tell these families that I can't do the services that I need to do. I want these kids to have a bright future. I want to change a life the way my life was changed. So please, allow me that opportunity at the very least. Thank you.
Thank you. Elijah Phillips, George Escobedo, Jessica Vasquez, Jacqueline Ellis Trice, Howard Uller, any of these names here, Edith Solomon, we have Elijah, George Escobedo. You can just come on up and just give your name.
I'm Howard Euler, speaking on behalf of the Unity Gang Collaborative. 2 quick points, both endorsing no cuts. One, I'm in possession of a study that's now 2.5 years in the making of hardcore gang intervention by Professors Georgia Leap and Todd Franke at UCLA. They are studying our collaborative and some of the grid work in South LA. 2 very important conclusions right up front in their report. 1, intervention works. 2, it cuts other crimes. This is scientific study, not conjecture. Final point. Intervention is not funded to scale. It's at least 75% short of what it should be. It's already been cut when you started funding it. Why cut it another dime? This works. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just ask, is Elijah Phillips here, could call twice?
Okay. Hi, I'm Edith Solomon. I work with LAPD PAL program. I work under Boyle Heights Grid at Alma Family Services. I do case management, and I'm passionate about what I do. I myself grew up in Boyle Heights. I am a statistics that's really considered going to UCLA, and the sad thing is that is what our kids are. Most of Boyle Heights don't even get the opportunity. A lot of the kids that I service have never been to university or even heard of university, opportunities for them. We provide services to low-income community with high crime activity and low academic achievement. We service the schools and help as be an assistance. I've seen a lot of changes in our children as far as their academic achievement, their drop in truancies. Aside from that, the connection that they have with their parents, the bond that they built with the police department that we have helped establish. We're creating successful individuals that should in the future be another number to UCLA, Berkeley, USC. Don't take that away from us.
Ma'am, what is your name? I didn't catch it at the beginning. What is your name?
Edith Solomon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline Ellis Trice, and I'm representing the Watts Gang Task Force. And you've heard many people here today speak on behalf of intervention and prevention programs. I'd specifically like to address the Summer Night Lights programs in the Watts community. Last year, we had the privilege of having those services in 3 of the housing developments, which provided not only a lot of opportunity for our youth and families to have activities right in their areas, but it also provided jobs for our youth. Our concerns for this year, if cuts are done, there's already been cuts to the summer youth employment programs. There's, are considering cuts for rec and parks and the housing developments, and we just want to urge you to not make any budget cuts, but to add money in. We want to, you all to just consider that for everything, for the grid and non-grid programs, prevention and intervention, as well as Summer Night Lights. We need those programs desperately. Thank you.
George Escobedo, second time. Jessica Vasquez, put those in file. Tony Zepeda, Isa K. Merkskin, Teresa Nazardit,
Good afternoon. My name is Tony Zepeda. I'm the director with SEAS Gang Intervention. We work the 4 grids, and I wanted to come here and give you statistics in these 4 grids. In these 13 months of working the contract, in an area of 12.5 miles, we've served 560 young people. 200 of those young people are currently receiving wraparound services. We've responded to over 100 gang-involved incidents, built 150 collaborations with agencies, institutions, and government, working on 10 peace efforts with about 20 neighborhoods, and preparing for Florence Graham, 243 parolees that would be released by the end of this summer. So we're asking you to stand in solidarity with us and not do any cuts. The hardest thing to do in this job is to hear a mother cry because her son just got killed and have to stand there and look them in the eye and provide them with services and be real about those services and follow through with those services. Thank you for your time.
Isa K. Mexon. Well, you don't have to be a social scientist to figure out the dreadful impact of cutting these kinds of programs. And it is unconscionable that we are even having this discussion, as one of the people said. You know, my pitch, because I've been here before you, is the military budget, which is unacceptable. I have another article for you, this one dealing with the expansion of the base on Guam, which the people of Guam don't want, because the people of Okinawa don't want that base. You need to look at the Greeks and how they're dealing with this. They don't want to accept the cuts in their lives that matter, and neither should we. And so you must support these people and all of these demands for our youth.
Thank you. Thank you very much. These are the last cards that will come up to speak on the grid, and that's Teresa Nazaret, Adia Serdan, Isabel and Jose Ortiz, Bill Burgess, Cherie Bremont, and Connie Rice. Those are the last names. Others will go in file.
She's going to need a translator.
Yes, good to translator. Thank you. Just hold on just a second.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Teresa Lazarit.
Good afternoon, my name is Teresa Lazarit.
Vengo a representar el programa RAID en el noreste de Los Ángeles del Children's Hospital.
I come here representing the program GRID in Northeast LA, the Children's Hospital.
Estoy aquí porque quieren cortar los fondos.
I'm here because you want to cut the budget.
Y este programa nos ha ayudado a mí y a mi hija.
This program has helped me and my daughter.
Ella tiene bajo estima
She has low self-esteem.
y tiene un psicólogo por una hora.
She is being seen by a psychologist for an hour.
Y yo también.
And me too.
Ellos nos han ayudado mucho.
They have helped us a lot.
Y ha cambiado mucho mi vida desde que ellos nos ayudan.
And my life has changed a lot since they have helped us.
Y no pagamos nada.
And we don't pay for anything.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Aida Sereda. I'm the Director of Youth Violence and Gang Prevention and representing Children's Hospital Los Angeles, serving the Cypress Park Northeast Zone, which went across around 3 council members, including Rizar, Garcetti, and Reyes. I'm here to just say that this has become more than just a project to us. This really has become a responsibility. I want us to remember the kind of youth we are serving in the zone. We clearly are serving those youth who have been given up on, youth that no one else wants to work with. Common profile in our zone is that youth in our zone have 8 out of 9 risk factors on average. Each family averages about 6 members. These are high-risk, high-need families, and we've witnessed an incredible amount of chronic trauma, seen a lot of mental health issues, and recently even enrolled a youth who is blind. We service high-risk, high-need youth, and I just say that to please continue to invest not only in this community, but allow us to support communities that are voiceless. Thank you.
Mi nombre es Isabel Torres.
My name is Isabel Torres.
Soy madre soltera.
I'm a single mother.
Tengo 2 hijos.
I have 2 children.
Y estoy muy contenta de encontrar un programa como Children's Hospital.
And I'm very happy to find a program as Children's Hospital.
Mis hijos tienen mucha ayuda.
My children receive a lot of help.
Y los ayudan a no involucrarse en pandillas o gangas.
And they help them not being involved in gangs.
Los tienen siempre ocupados.
They always have them doing something.
Estoy aquí porque me importa la seguridad de mis hijos.
I'm here because I care about the security of my children.
Y mi comunidad.
And my community too.
En sus manos tienen el futuro de nuestros hijos.
The security of our children is in your hands.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have your name again?
Isabel Torres.
Torres?
Isabel.
Thank you. All right. Could we get a mic for Mr. Burgess?
I didn't say my name yet.
I know who you are, though.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm here representing the 77-2 grid, the prevention contract. I'm a consultant with ADAP, which is primarily the Hyde Park area, which I've been a resident of for 45 years. This contract has provided a youth and family service on West Park, over on Hyde Park and West Boulevard, where things have been going so good that the property manager has provided services for us because of what's been going on over there. He chartered a bus for us in January to send 45 of his residents to Big Bear. Mr. Parks, your office provided a bus the next month and sent 35 of our residents to the California African Museum, and things are going good. We just ask that as our elected officials don't fight with us, fight for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just make sure these last call on these names. Adia Serdao, Teresa Nazaret, Isabel, and Jose Ortiz. Okay, Cherie?
Good afternoon. My name is Sharice Bouman Weaver. I'm president and CEO of the Brotherhood Crusade. We are a grid provider for the Southwest 2, representing Council District 8 and 9. Wanted to share some sobering thoughts. We spent in 2008 $2 billion on suppression. We spend $252,000 a year per child when they're in juvenile. We spend over $9,000 with LAUSD youth. We spend with the grid $5,000 per youth. That is a shame. We are providing results. We are providing services to the youth who no one would like to serve. As I say, no one wants to serve the youth that are in our grid program. They are academic failing. They have mental health issues. If we have a 10% reduction, we will not be able to provide youth to the children who no one would like to serve. Thank you.
Councilman Parks. I ask permission, my name is Rhonda Foster, and as a victim of gang violence and not having heard from a victim, I did submit a card, but you just didn't get to my name. But
So you just butt up in line then, huh?
I'm sorry?
You just butt up in line then, huh?
Well, I asked permission first, and then I'm asking permission.
Wrong person. Let me ask you this, did you fill out a card?
Yes, I did.
Okay, why don't you talk, and I'll see if I can find your card, but Ms. Rice is the last speaker on this part of the budget.
Yes. Okay. As I said, I'm Rhonda Foster, and I was a victim of gang violence. My son, Evan Foster, was killed. He was 7 years old, and my baby was injured, taking him to the park to pick up his soccer trophy. Two of the gang members, they actually had been incarcerated, and one had only been out a month when this occurred. I can only say that if a program like the GRID was in place at that time, their lives could have been turned around. I'm also currently a case manager for Community Build, and I also go into youth prisons. So,
thank you, Ms. Foster. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Connie Rice, and I work with the Advancement Project. I know that as council people representing these communities, the last thing you want to do is hurt those communities by taking away these services. I know that you have an extraordinarily tough job in cutting the budget and living within our means. But ladies and gentlemen, cutting these services actually increases your costs. Every single community group here, please do not cut the budgets for these community groups. They have already lost funding from their foundations. They've already lost services and funding from LA Unified. If you cut them, you are really endangering and increasing your costs. Please understand, we are celebrating low crime, but in the hot zones, children still dodge bullets. These are the people who keep the kids safe. The GRID office is absolutely essential. I understand you've got to cut a lot of money. I do not envy your task. It is hard. But we just spent $7 million on a reptile enclosure. I'm happy for Reggie, but we need to save our kids first. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, let me just, I got a couple of cards in the wrong stack. Linda Moran and also Brenda Wilson on the issue of the year-round shelters. And that's the last two speakers. Are either one of them here?
Good afternoon. I'm sorry we're both limping, so it took us a little while. Twin thing surgery, a minute. Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to say, for each and every one of you, it seems as though what I should be doing here today is standing up here saying a prayer, okay? Because your task is monumental. So know that prayers are going to be going your way, of course, to ensure that you are, in fact, going to make the right decisions. And we want to think increase and no cut. But I'm Linda Moran, Deputy Director of New Image Emergency Shelter for the Homeless. And we serve more than 200 homeless duplicated annually, a year. Okay, what'd I say? 200,000 homeless annually. And we are a point of entry for homeless individuals and families with children, and we most certainly need to continue. Brenda? Okay. Been around a long time. 38th and Broadway Place. That's hers. We need to we're making a difference with the numbers of homeless that we see. However, I can tell you in the last year that our numbers have increased more than you could ever imagine. Our 400-bed shelter is, let's just say we're taking in a lot more than what we need to. Women especially, more than 125, 30 a night. over contract that often come in beaten and raped and so on. So we have an open door policy for our women, but it's grown tremendously. Also for men, we've taken a little more men, up to over 400, probably 450. But even over and above that, we're turning away well over 100 men a night. The need is greater this year in this economy than ever before, and it's growing. So we're hoping and we're praying that you do not cut the winter shelter program, year-round shelter program, because the need is just too great. We have case managers that do nothing but identify jobs and affordable housing. We need your help for that funding. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The remaining approximately 3 dozen cards that we have for the grid will go in file, and that concludes public comment. We'd ask the city staff to come up at this time to address the CLA's document. No, the whole thing. Yeah. Ma'am, I think we said in the beginning that we were going to set aside a certain amount of time and that the cards that would be read in order, and that's what we've done. And we've gone over that 30 minutes. If you're dealing with the grid, if you had a card in for a specific item, every one of those cards were read, and those that were here were able to speak. Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I'm going to sort of briefly walk through the main issues that are contained in the report before you, and then step out. And I know that you're going to want to go page by page with Karen and walk through the issues. But in essence, let me start out by saying that we continue to face some really difficult economic times. The mayor's proposed budget had $492 million gap in it, and he proposed a variety of solutions to close that gap. Now, early on in the committee hearings, you instructed that the sales tax revenue be dropped by 1% to be more consistent with the state and the county. You also instructed that the parking-related transaction revenue be taken out of the budget. In addition, you discussed a number of issues, inequities, omissions in the budget that had to be funded. So at the conclusion of the hearings, we were facing a $93 million budget hole that had to be closed. My staff in the last few days have been able to identify about $30 million in revenue to add back to that. Some of it came from the Coalition of City Unions, and I want to thank them for some of their ideas, dog licensing fees and others. So what we were facing was a $63 million hole in the expenditure side. And quite frankly, our options as we sit here today are very limited. We're facing another large budget gap in 11-12 and beyond. That's going to continue to grow according to projections, essentially based on, well, largely based on pension contributions over which we have little control. So the crux of the report is recommending structural solutions that are going to begin to get us back in structural balance over the next few years. There are some one-time solutions in the budget. I think those are unavoidable. I think it's unrealistic to think that this could be balanced in 1 year structurally, but it is vitally important that we move towards getting to that structural balance. So in essence, to close the $63 million gap, we are proposing that another 1,000 position equivalents be eliminated in civilian general funded non-revenue producing employees. We realize that on top of what's already occurred, that's a significant hit. But again, we are talking position equivalents. As we say in the report, we strongly encourage continued dialogue with the city's unions to see whether there are solutions other than position reductions that can be used to close this budget gap. We do recommend including the reduction in workdays as proposed by the mayor, which totals $63 million, excuse me. So globally, I think that's what's before you. I think the last comment I want to make is I know there's been a lot of confusion about how many positions the city actually needs to eliminate, and I think it's important to keep that in the context of how it's always been discussed, which are position equivalents. Now, when you look at the 1,761 positions that are in this current budget slated to be eliminated, or the equivalents, the $63 million in furloughs or reduced workdays equates to another 1,000 positions, so we're now at nearly 2,800 positions. And with the number of positions that we've already eliminated to date, we are approaching the 3,500 mark in positions. So the numbers have remained constant. They are a little bit lower than they were, primarily because we have been able to recognize some increased revenue that we didn't anticipate 3 or 4 months ago, but again, it's minor. So we're here to answer questions and walk you through the various adds and deletes and changes, but we believe what's before you is consistent with the instructions that we've received throughout the committee hearings.
Okay, thank you very much. Miguel, do you have anything to add before we get into the document? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Karen, if you could take us through the document, and colleagues, let me just reflect that this is a combination, this document is a combination of the variety of comments and concerns discussed over the last couple of weeks in the budget. As you can read, or as Jerry mentioned in the preamble, there is a significant shortfall in the budget. There was limited ability to add things back in the budget because of the funding issues. And so as we go forward, those items that do not appear in this report are still on a ledger as unfunded, but they were not added into the budget because, again, there is no funding. So if you could take us through this, and again, with the backdrop of how we got started and how we are where we are today, I think it's important not only for the committee members, but also the general public.
Okay. Karen Kalfine with the Chief Legislative Analyst's Office. Just to start out by how we got here and where we started. On April 20th, the mayor released his proposed budget, and over the last couple of weeks, the Budget and Finance Committee has held hearings and heard presentations from the mayor, the CAO, and all city departments. Following its hearing last Wednesday, the committee gave instructions to our office to make recommendations taking into consideration the information provided by the committee and received during those hearings. As Jerry mentioned already, there are certain general goals that the committee asked us to address. One is to remove uncertain revenue from the proposed budget, to establish a 3% reserve fund, to address the structural deficit to the extent possible, to make corrections which were raised during the hearings and in some cases after the committee hearings, provide for equitable expense reductions among all elected officials, and provide for further review of a number of other issues. Also, as mentioned, overall, taking into account the committee's instructions and our further review of the budget, there's nearly a $100 million gap still to be filled. So overall, what's been done is to remove the uncertain revenues from the budget, and those include asset restructuring funds and an increase in sales tax. It corrects a combination of errors and omissions, underfunding, some actions which were contrary to the adopted policy. Together, those items amount to about $93 million. And as I said, to correct the inequity on elected officials' reductions. We've identified about $36 million of additional revenue and expenditure savings, and this roughly addresses the corrections that needed to be made in the proposed budget, leaving about a $64 million shortfall still to cover.
think Jerry covered some of the other issues generally regarding the reserve fund. This provides for a 3% reserve fund, which is $129 million, which includes a $10.8 million contingency reserve. Very few other recommendations are made in this report that are additions other than corrections and technical adjustments. The only other recommendations generally are those where there's a special funding source or where there was an exchange where there was no net increase to the general fund. We've also included an attachment to the report that includes reports that the committee has requested and referrals to the policy committees on a number of items. If you'd like, I can start walking through page by page if that's a helpful way to do it. Okay. What I'm going to be going through is the document that's titled 2010-11 Proposed Budget, Budget and Finance Committee Changes as Proposed by the CLA. So on page 1, what this provides is the overview of the budget, where it started with the $492 million deficit identified by the mayor's office and the solutions that were proposed by the mayor's office. This just gives some general background. I won't go into any detail on that. I think those were covered fairly extensively in the hearings already. On the next page, page 2, it continues just some of the summaries, also noting that over the next 4 years, the outlook for the next 4 years, there's still a projected deficit projected for those years. And what that indicates is that even though these projections are much better than they were a year ago, it still indicates that there's a lingering structural deficit that needs to be addressed. And the only way to address that structural deficit is to make some permanent changes in the budget. Generally, because those permanent changes involve services, that translates into staff, and what we're looking at is potential for a number of other position eliminations. Also on page 2...
Let me just say one thing, Karen.
Sure.
If we could make, as we go forward so we can follow it, on your first 8 or 9 pages of summary, we'll ask questions after you're through with that. When we get to the page 1 that deals with the budget committee, as we go through each page, then if there's questions, we'll address them as we move forward.
Okay.
All right.
All right. So that's just the overall summary. On the bottom of page 2, we have global recommendations. This includes to continue employee workday reductions. These were proposed by the mayor, representing about $63 million in savings. We're recommending that those continue. I mentioned the potential for position eliminations, and one point I want to emphasize is that although the gap would equate to about 1,000 additional position eliminations, but not every position elimination necessarily translates into a layoff. But that's something that will have to be calculated in the course of a very short period of time in order to achieve the savings that are identified here. And what we're assuming is 9 months worth of savings. That's what the 1,000 positions would equate to. Moving on to page 3, removing uncertain and economically sensitive revenues. I already mentioned that what this proposal does is to take out the uncertain revenues from the asset restructuring and sales tax. Also recommending a resolution declaring a fiscal emergency to implement the workday reductions and to continue the hard hiring freeze that's been in place in the past year. Also request the CAO to continue its labor negotiations and to continue looking at the pension systems as well. Moving on to page 3, these are just usual instructions for staff to conduct fee studies, provide information on a monthly basis in financial status reports, and so on. Moving on to page 5, this is a summary of the reserve fund, which I've already indicated is proposed at $129 million. That's a 3% reserve. It gives a summary of the financial policies and what's contained in this budget in relation to those financial policies. And I'll just move on to the revenue changes.
Let me ask you, did we skip page 4?
No, those are just general
Just general
instructions. Right?
Okay, all right.
Okay, and then on revenue changes, this is where we've looked at different options for increasing revenue. So the first item there, uncertain revenues, is the roughly $56 million of decreased uncertain revenues. Then there's a section on licenses, permits, fees, and fines. Those are adjustments to receipts and reimbursements as a result of increased fees or increased reimbursements that have been identified. Those total about $32 million. It also includes reversions from current year funds that have been identified. On expenditure changes, that first item under budget reduction is the gap that we've identified and mentioned previously. That's the $64 million. Moving on to page 7, this summarizes the actions that might be taken to reduce that $64 million.
Hold on just a minute, Karen.
Sure.
No, the thing is, we were going through the summary, and then when we get into approximately, let's see, page...
Still the summary here. We're still on the summary.
Yeah, we're still in summary. We get to approximately, I guess, page 8,
Okay.
where we're into departments. Then we'll go as it relates to questions per item that anyone has an interest in.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask a question here in format? If you have an increase, for example, page 6, the first licenses, permits, fees, and fines, recognized projected building and safety civil fines, you have an increase of $5 million and a decrease of $5 million, but you're counting those, so I'm trying to reconcile those.
On the documentary transfer tax? Or on the licenses fee, yes.
Yeah, and you also have it on the documentary. Can you explain why do you have that in each category? That would amount to 0.
It does here on the ledger, but basically what this is there are 2 areas, these are 2 areas where there may be a potential for revenue somewhere down the line. Those are, at this point, are uncertain. So what we're recommending to do is take the estimates that we have now, which are the best estimates, but not necessarily what may be coming in, and put that in the Budget Stabilization Fund. The Budget Stabilization Fund has been created to mitigate against, for years where, it's actually kind of a mandatory savings plan where money goes into that budget stabilization fund to mitigate against years where there are fewer revenues and perhaps more difficult economic times. There's $500,000 in there currently. These anticipated revenues, if they should come in, would be placed in that fund, and if they're available, then it would require council mayor action to actually spend them. So for the revenue calculation, we're not actually counting them right now. If they come in, we'll put them in that fund, and then the council and mayor can take action to actually expend them.
Before that, you had a place that said uncertain revenues, and so I was wondering why you didn't put these in that category as well.
Well, they're not actually counted as an increase in revenue. If they happen to come in, they could go into that budget stabilization fund.
I got it.
And these are actions where there's been state law enacted, and so we just don't know what's going to happen. But there's some anticipated revenue that could come in, and I think departments are already working on looking at the possibilities on these.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to page 7. One thing that we wanted to ensure is that there are some major areas that still require some further review. One is the document that was provided by the United Firefighters of Los Angeles and the Coalition of LA City Unions. They provided a document that suggested changes and potential for savings and so on. That's one area. The Proposition A funding program is another area. Measure R the identification of positions for layoffs, and the workers' comp restructuring. With regard to the positions, the position eliminations and the identification of layoffs, as I mentioned, that's work that's going to have to be done on fairly short order because those positions and savings haven't quite been identified yet. So that's the work that's going to proceed in the next month or so.
Chairman, if I could, at this point, if I could, Mr. Chairman, add one other study that needs to be done. There's been a proposal by the Department of Building and Safety, which I've looked at. It has some merit. I think we need to look at that, and that would be using certain enterprise funds to create a baseline for them to operate from as far as the permitting requests, et cetera, come through the department during the coming year. And since they are enterprise funded, they have a proposal. I think it's worthy of the review in this same venue that you're looking at these other proposals. So if you would do that, and I'm sure that they'll get that to you within the next 5 minutes, probably.
That certainly can be added. All right, then on the next page, starting to go over the expenditure changes. There's a section here on the elected officials.
Let me go back one page. I'm sorry. I think we asked verbally that we consider, in the sense of parking enforcement, is to get some idea why we do not enforce on Sunday and what that potential revenue source would be. And then the other one, which is cost savings, is some analysis of the resolution authority, general fund resolution authorities.
Okay, we can add those.
Okay.
Those can be added to the committee report. All right, on the elected officials, one of the instructions of the committee was to try to find a more equitable allocation of reductions for all the elected officials. In the proposed budget, for example, the city attorney's office had an 18% reduction. The council, when you include the council, the community program funds, was a 40% reduction. So there was a desire to have this more equitable. So what's proposed here is overall a 9% reduction for the council and mayor's office budgets. It also restores funding for the various programs that had previously been funded in the general city purposes budget. For example, the homeless shelters, the community services funding, and so on. It also reappropriates for the controller $250,000 for audits. It adds back the funding for the city attorney's office to reflect a 10% reduction in their budget, which is offset partially by revenue. And it makes a roughly an 8% reduction in the grid program funding. So overall, it would be about a 9% reduction for the council and mayor, 7.5% for the controller, and about a 10% reduction for the city attorney.
Okay, colleagues, any questions on any of the items on page 8?
Yeah, on the grid funding, you want to talk about that now?
Yes.
Okay, I have a couple of questions that were given to me by a member of the Public Safety Committee. They asked me to read these into the record, and I will present them to you so you have a written document. So we'll just get them on the record. They would like responses back to these. So when we bring this back to council a week from now, they'd like to have these answers. What is the process used to determine the amount of funding for gang prevention programs? Is there a rationale for why prevention funding is allocated $1 million while intervention programs only receive $500,000? And is there a way to make funding more equitable? Number 2 on prevention is how much of the general fund or grant funding is used to supplement staffing for summer nights lights? Could this amount of funding be used to preserve jobs for city employees within recreation and parks? On intervention funding, how are you addressing the violence occurring outside the grid zones? And then number 2, with a decrease in public safety services covering our libraries and recreation and park facilities, have there been preliminary discussions about increasing the intervention funding to reduce the amount of violence in the areas surrounding parks and facilities? And finally, how much funding has already been spent on contractor services for evaluations? So they asked that this be given to the record, and if you'd have that information for us in council, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay.
That's it over.
Yeah. Mr. Chair?
I think is this the only place, Karen? Is there
Yes.
another-
Yes,
This
it
would be
is.
the only place. Let me just ask one thing, just for clarity. There's been numbers thrown around. It was 10%. What was the final number?
I'm sorry, what was
What was the final cut on grid?
it? Was an 8%
8%.
reduction, roughly 1.4 million.
Okay, Mr. Weezer?
Well, I don't want to belabor a lot of the work that this committee has done already and get into a lot more discussion about these items, but if there's a way for us to register our no votes on this item, Mr. Chair, I'd like to do that at some point.
Okay.
How do you plan to handle this?
Okay, what is it?
We disagree on an item.
So you disagree with the 8% cut on the grids?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, the item, if there's a issue, we certainly can address it page by page. Colleagues, on page 8, addressing the grid, paragraph 3, we can now take a vote on our position as it relates to the CLA's report of an 8% cut. in the grid.
And actually, the details on page 9.
Yeah, the details on page 9. So we have a voice vote. Mr. Rizar?
No.
Okay, Mr. Zine?
I just have the rest of the moment.
We're looking to vote on paragraph 3, page 8, that deals with the 8% cut in the grid.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Smith?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye. Ms. Perry?
Aye.
Mr. Kretz?
I'm still not, maybe you could clarify this for me. I'm not entirely clear on whether we're talking about voting against that whole
We're talking
section
about...
or just about the gang.
We're talking about paragraph 3, the 8% cut recommended by the CLA's report as it relates to the $1.4 million cut out of the grid.
And so an aye vote would be in favor of
Favor
that
of
cut.
the CLA report.
I vote no.
Okay, so that's a 5-2 on that item. Okay. Any other items on page 8?
On page 9, again, this is the detail so that you can see what the restorations and the deletions are. So under the general city purposes budget, the funding for the homeless program, the council district community services, the citywide special event fee subsidy, and the deletion of the proposed neighborhood and community services trust fund. That's under GCP. Under the mayor, we've already talked about the grid program. The second item there is just to transfer the performance management unit from funding in the general city purposes budget into the mayor's office. There's no recommended change in funding for that item. The next is how the restorations would be done, and this was an instruction by the committee to reduce the special parking revenue fund by $10 million. Then moving on, under animal services, funding is provided to temporarily secure the Northeast Animal Care Center, and what was discussed was providing resolution authority for 16 positions, and there's partial funding in the budget for those people who are currently working at that center who would then be redistributed among the other animal shelters and the animal care centers, so that none of the other shelters would actually be closed.
I just want to make sure that the animals themselves, what are going to become of the animals?
What would happen with the animals at the Northeast Center is that those would be moved to other shelters, which then would reduce the capacity at those other shelters.
Would they be killed in those other centers or not? It depends upon adoption and all the other stuff.
It depends on a variety of factors.
So we're not necessarily taking down any animals at this point?
Well, that's something that would have to be determined probably by the Animal Services Department.
Most of those animals were required to keep for evidence purposes and for a variety of other reasons, so the likelihood that they'll survive the transfer is very high.
For the ones at the Northeast Center, I think the impact could potentially be on the animals in the other shelters.
Let me just ask you to clarify one thing. It was recommended to close the shelter the movement and retaining the 16 bodies are spread throughout the city to prevent closure of a second shelter.
That's correct.
Okay.
Right. So what this does is provide for that security at the shelter. It provides funding for roughly 6 months funding for the continuing staff, and it's offset by increased fees. Now, if additional fees come in during the year, then those could be allocated beyond the 6 month that's recommended.
Can we have staff come up for a second from Animal Services? Just a quick second.
Mr. Koretz, you want to ask your question while staff is coming up?
Yeah, it's on point to this. I got different information from Animal Services than what's just been told
Okay,
to
well,
us.
they're at the table now. We can...
Yeah, I just wanted to, and I know Mr. Koretz is on the same wavelength as I am on this. I'm hearing stories that by closing it, the special animals for witnesses and all that is one story, but that the bumping rights, so to speak, among animals might be such that as many as 45,000 animals could be... What is the real story in terms of the animals, the dogs and the cats, with the closing of this center? It's all right, they're turning it on. Your name for the record?
Linda Barth from LA Animal Services. The animals that are at Northeast are largely either mothers with nursing young, which might be 4 or 5 puppies or kittens that could later be adopted, or they're animals that we're holding for evidence or other reasons. Certainly the animals that we're holding for evidence will have to then be transferred to one of our other operating animal care centers. Usually the hold periods of those animals are anywhere from 30 days, could be 60 or 90 days. What happens is that where an adoptable animal or two might be in that same kennel, and we might have 1 or 2 animals for a week or 2, and then another week or 2, in the same period we have to hold 1 evidence animal, maybe 5 or 6 or 7 adoptable animals might have been there, been selected, been adopted, and moved on. That's why the estimate is 2,500 to 40 to 4,000. So it's not 45,000, it's 2,500 to 4,000 approximate additional euthanasias that we might see system-wide because of the long holding period for these animals that are evidence animals. Conversely, if we euthanize the moms and the nursing puppies or kittens, again, that's why it's a high number of animals then it would be euthanized, because the mom and maybe 3 or 4 young, those animals, when they reach maturity at 8 weeks, can be adopted. They don't cost a lot to maintain if we've kept the mom, and then we gain the adoption revenue from adopting out the puppies or the kittens.
So the 2,500 to 4,000 that might find themselves on the block, what effort will be made to find them homes or deal with that as an issue of animal rights?
Well, I think that the department, particularly in the last year, has worked very, very hard to increase our adoption rates. 76% of our dogs are already going home, which is an extraordinarily high rate, and over 50% of our cats. So we continue to work hard to come up with new ways of outreaching and adopting more animals. The reality is that animals that are being held for evidence, by law, we need to keep them in our custody. So options like fostering of evidence animals, for example, is discouraged by the city attorney. Those are animals that we have a legal responsibility to hold and keep safe, so we have to keep them. Certainly, we will continue to escalate our efforts at adoption, but it's, and we're very successful, but we just have a concern that capacity is being reduced. And when capacity is reduced, and it's not just that, it's the officers. I mean, we're essentially going to lose 10% of our officers with the work hours reduction as well. So although we welcome the idea of this, of retaining some of the employees for Northeast so that we can use at other locations, it doesn't solve the problem of reduced kennel capacity, and it doesn't address the problem of reducing our officers. Our officers are the people who are on the street, responding when there's dogs on a street, when there's a dog in a schoolyard, and so forth. They're the ones that are out there. They are the face of public safety and animal-related laws. So we are also concerned about that aspect of the proposed cuts.
Okay. Mr. Koretz?
Okay, let me try to cut to the chase. And using figures that we got from Animal Services, although not necessarily from the people sitting at the table, the estimates we were given is that if we close the Northeast shelter, we will probably euthanize between 4,000 and 4,500 more animals. that the cost of closing the Northeast shelter would be roughly $500,000 in security costs, part of which are budgeted here currently, and the cost of actually having to euthanize 4,500 animals, and also the lost adoption revenue. So if it costs us $800,000 or so to close it, actually, if it costs us around $800,000 to keep it open, if it costs us around $500,000 or so to close it, the net cost of keeping it open and avoiding 4,500 euthanasias is $350,000 for the year. So if we split that in half, try to keep it open for 6 months and then see how it's going, because we expect that the revenues will increase, $175,000 to avoid 4,500 euthanasias, I think is a reasonable amount. And I think we can also, probably more easily than anything else, seek some private funding to reduce that $175,000 to an even smaller number.
I think those CAO would you comment on those figures? I don't think, if you had a chance to vet those.
In regards to the Northeast shelter, to keep that center open, we would have to identify $1.8 million over the course of a full fiscal year. So over 6 months, we'd have to identify $900,000 to keep the center open to see if revenue will actually keep up with that. In the CLA's recommendations, we recommended transferring the Northeast shelter staff to the other operating shelters in order to keep those shelters open at full function. So technically, we add back the staff necessary for the Northeast shelter. So in order to get the department back to being whole and keeping all the centers open as they currently operate, we would have to restore the $1.8 million in furlough savings that were taken out of the department. Now, we're working with the Public Safety Committee in identifying a good use for the $300,000 in feral cat spay-neuter funds that cannot be utilized. And what we would like to recommend is utilizing that $300,000 to reduce the furlough hours for the vet staff and some of the animal control officers within the department who enforce the spay-neuter laws of the city. So if we take that from the $1.8 million, we're only looking for about $1.5 million over a full fiscal year, or $750,000 over the course of 6 months. Now, depending on what happens with some of the legislation that's going through the state legislature, will depend on whether or not we can generate enough revenue to pay for keeping the Northeast shelter open for a full fiscal year. And at this time, we don't know it, and it wasn't identified in the CLA's recommendations because that revenue is not currently on the books.
So if we wanted to do it for half the year to see how we're doing, then we'd be talking about $900,000, and we could allocate that $300,000, reducing it to $600,000, and we could allocate all the costs of euthanizing the animals and providing the security equipment that's in the budget now and eliminating that, and get it down to a relatively minimal figure for the 6 months.
Yes, we could. We also have an additional $300,000 in the UB related to funding the second half of the Northeast shelter positions next fiscal year. So if we were to play our cards, the front half of the fiscal year, we could utilize that funding to further reduce the amount necessary to see if we can generate enough revenue to keep Northeast and the remaining shelters open. But that would be a policy decision.
Well, it's one that I would recommend. If we actually have enough different funds to cover it for the 6 months, I'd at least like to recommend that we keep it open for the additional first 6 months and then see how the revenue has been additionally generating into the animal control system.
And I think that would be the goal in restoring it, is to try to keep it neutral in terms of cost. Any additional cost would then just increase that gap that much more.
I think, Mr. Gritz, from your comments, I think during the committee meeting is what drove, I think, this compromise, that the positions were retained. We didn't close a second facility, but if you keep this one open, you're creating a hole of about 1.8, and the other issues that go forward, there's no assurance that another shelter will not be closed during the year. And so what we're trying to do is move the bodies to the remaining shelters to get them to be maintained as full service. And so I think that's what the compromise they came back with. Let me ask Animal Services, when you gave the figure $2,500, $4,000, is that a monthly, annual, semi-annual? What does that represent?
That's looking at 1 year, annual.
That's an annual number. And that's an estimate as a number. There's not 2,000 animals sitting in the queue ready to be euthanized.
That's correct. That's an estimate based on the last about 12 years of euthanasia in relation to kennel capacity and holding time. Let me also clarify that right now there's only actually 11 employees at Northeast. So out of the 16 positions that are addressed, they're not all filled. There's actually only 9 ACTs, in fact, at work, and 1 supervisor. Because there's no public activity, we really only need enough staff to maintain the animals.
Let me ask you this. Have you, if we followed the mayor's budget of closing the facility and eliminating the positions and then had another facility close, what would be the impact from that action?
We could ultimately combined euthanize 8 to 10 or 11,000 additional animals.
So the thing is by the action of the committee is we've somewhat cut that down, to a third?
That's correct. It leaves it at the Northeast closure, but it does not resolve our issue with officer cuts.
No, it doesn't, but I'm saying we're trying to work through this to give you the best ability to resolve it.
Yeah, I wonder if we could just give direction to work with the CLA's office to see if we can find sources of funding to allow us to keep it open, because there are a couple pots of money, around $300,000 each, and substantial costs for shutting it down.
Let me just say
I
this.
think we can come somewhat in that range without actually having to cut into a lot of general fund money.
Let me just say, Mr. Kretz, we're trying to close almost a $100 million budget. We can ask them to report back on the comparison, but again, if we keep it open, we know that, and this budget is put together with a little bit of glue and a whole lot of Band-Aids, that you could end up adding a 1.8, which means roughly a layoff of maybe as many as 20 plus more people to keep this open. So I think we can ask them to
just 1.8, I agree, but there are pots of money to be accessed.
So I'm saying we'll ask them to come back and report the comparison, but the issue today is not trying to create a bigger hole, but we'll certainly report back on the information.
Right.
And one thing I'd like you to do is, from a PR standpoint, to get the message out about these particular animals. I really think that if you did a PSA and did some outreach to community, there are some people who right now could be motivated to pick up a dog or a cat if they knew it was either them or they're going to be killed. I think we need to do an effort. You can go with my neighborhood councils. I'll tell you, if you had a list of what they are, we could hype it just like Herb Wesson and Paul Koretz do for cats and dogs on the council floor. I would like us to make an effort to save as many as we can. Will you give us a plan and do that?
Sure.
And we talked to our generous benefactor in my district as well.
Yes.
Maybe he can help.
Okay. If we could ask for that report back on the comparison and also the report back on a plan to save animals, and both of those, if we can get those so they could be part of the Monday discussion.
Right. On the animal shelter itself, we'll look at all the different fundings, the available funding sources, and see if it's something that can be done on a cost-neutral basis, but we'll work on it in the meantime.
All right. So the next item? Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Quickly, briefly, on the issue of your security cameras, alarm, and security patrol, are those cameras going to be monitored, or is it just going to tape the facility?
I don't know the plan. I think that's General Services Department that provided that proposal.
They were unmonitored cameras.
They're monitored?
Unmonitored.
Unmonitored. What about the security patrol? Who does that?
The security patrol is 24/7.
But I thought we cut that out for cameras and alarm, and it saved $100,000.
Correct. We did that.
Okay.
That's what's reflected in the CLA's recommendations.
Do you have a private security firm that's going to be contracted for that?
GSD provides security services, and they do have a contract if it exceeds a certain amount. We can look into that for looking at a combination between cameras and security staff, but that's not in the recommendation.
I mean, there's the ability, if you're putting cameras in, to monitor them, and the expense of going to a private vendor or 24-hour security there, you may be able to make some change, since General Services does provide roving patrols. I just think that if you're going to swap one for another to try and save some money, you're talking about $91,000.
You make a very good point. I think there's a question that we need to pose to GSD and on how the best mix of funds and security measures to deal with the shelter.
Is the facility going to be occupied at all, or is it going to be totally shut?
It would be totally shut.
So it's going to be totally shut and secure, and we're going to hire someone to watch a vacant building. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think that was the
appropriate report back.
It was proposed that way because there were some security concerns in having a vacant shelter, and so this was a lower cost option than to have 24/7 security staff.
Well, then why are you doing the cameras? And why are you doing the alarm system?
I think there was a concern about the nighttime, and that was what the cameras were for.
What was proposed was that we had 24/7 and watching a vacant building that's boarded up and fenced up. And the idea was to see whether it was more cost-effective to put cameras and an alarm system and with the fencing and the boarding up, that would save over $100,000. And I think that was why that change was made on the CLA report.
And the city does have, through General Services, roving patrols, which they could be one of the facilities that they check periodically.
They certainly can be asked to do that, and so...
Yeah, and I think General Services is the one that would care for this issue and provide the best solution. I think it's fair to say that that facility in that particular area was very vulnerable during its construction time, and I don't know what the most cost-effective solution GSD can advise us as far as cameras and patrols. But I do think we do want to be careful, since it's a temporary closure, that the security works so that when the money's there to reopen the facility according to what the taxpayers will expect and the bondholders, that it's in good shape, that we can recommission easily.
To have a private security without a weapon, or a private security which normally don't have weapon, it doesn't really do a whole lot.
That may not be the best solution. Whatever GSD...
I'm just talking about what it says in this report. Where it's highlighted, it says, provide funding for a camera system, alarm system, and security patrol to temporarily secure the facility. On page 9, that's what I'm looking at. Is that the most reasonable, cost-efficient way to protect a vacant building? It's going to be fenced up and boarded. Probably not the most successful.
Well, I think it was a lower cost alternative, and that was something that was discussed in the committee hearings, and so this is the result of that discussion.
Well, they need to do a little more into that. I'm not talking about additional costs, I'm talking about security and make it reasonable. But cameras that aren't monitored, they really don't do a whole lot of good.
We'll ask General Service to come back with a plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
moving on the next item is under the city clerk. During the hearings, there was an identified shortfall of about $711,000 in the Business Improvement District's trust fund. This is for assessments that would be paid on city-owned property that are located within business improvement districts. This restores that funding.
And this was mandatory?
It is, yes.
Okay.
The next item, Finance, is to restore resolution authority for 2 revenue-generating positions in the Office of Finance. The revenues that would be coming in actually more than offset the cost of these positions, and so they're recommended for...
Colleagues, any questions on page 9?
Yeah, I have a question on those 2 positions. It seems to me that they're revenue-generating, and it's been identified by EAA that they could do more than that, and they would still be revenue-generating, and that there's sufficient work for them to do. Have you looked at the entire list of positions that were out there, and is this all that you could reasonably accommodate or justify, or why 2?
There were other positions that not necessarily all of them were revenue producing, and these are the ones where it appeared as though there was a reliable source of revenue. It doesn't mean that there can be some further look at what might be produced there, but this is what was recommended in with our discussions with the Office of Finance as well.
What are these 2 positions?
They are
auditors.
Tax compliance
I believe they're tax compliance officers.
Tax compliance, okay. So are you going to continue to look at that other proposal for the other positions then?
We can continue to look at that, yes.
Okay, and that will be done as a report back later when? When you will report back to us on what you found on those other positions?
Well, we can look at the other positions that they propose, but if they're not revenue producing, then, that could continue later on. We can look at whatever else they have, but I think there's thank you. There are some customer service positions and, let's see.
I thought there were some auditors, which goes to penetration and all that stuff.
Pardon me?
I thought there were some auditors in there, which goes to the penetration
The
rate, which
positions they
really
had
is.
were the two tax compliance officers, customer service specialist, finance collection investigator, and two of those. And I believe, we'll have to take another look. I believe this was all that they were willing to commit for revenue, and so we matched the revenue with the cost.
Okay, because as I looked at the list, more than, like half of it really was revenue producing.
Okay.
And two of them wasn't enough, in my opinion. So I just want you to look back and see, because if it's really revenue producing, that has always been our policy. Let's put those people on and do the job. They bring in more money than it costs us to have them, so we need to really take a look at that list.
Correct, but we just wanted to also ensure that the revenue would actually cover the cost of the position.
So please do that, and if be valuable, we'll have that back in council.
Sure. Okay.
The Special Parking Revenue Fund on the $10 million for the Bringing Back Broadway Garage, the last sentence says, these funds could be used to offset the additions contained in this package. What additions are you referring to?
These are the additions that, for the restoration of the homeless shelter program, the community district program, several items that had been deleted from funding from the general city purposes budget, including the LA Neighborhood Land Trust, the Downtown on Ice, At the Park After Dark, the Latino Film Festival, the Pan-African Film Festival, El Grito.
So the $10 million from that was in the mayor's budget, was in your report, and according to the committee, it's transferred over to restore those.
To restore funding and to make the more equitable allocation among the elected officials' budgets.
Equitable by elected officials, what does that mean?
That means that the elected official offices would roughly take the same type of reduction. So as they indicated, mayor council would take roughly a 9% reduction.
I see. Okay.
The controller 7.5%, and the city attorney about 10%.
Under your proposed plan, how much is our reserve fund?
$129 million.
How much percent?
3%.
It's 3%.
3% as instructed by this committee.
Okay. It was instructed by the committee. Okay. Okay, I'd like to record my no vote on the Special Parking Revenue Fund, Bringing Back Broadway Garage, $10 million loan that was given to the general fund that's not being repaid.
Okay. All right, any other questions on page 9 before we go to that? Page 9? Okay, on page 9, under the third bullet, Special Parking Revenue, all those in favor of supporting the CLA's report, which is the removal of $10 million from the Special Parking Revenue Fund?
We've already voted on that.
Yeah, just, you can record my no vote, I think that's fine.
Yeah, we voted on that in committee? Yeah, that's right.
So we voted on committee, right? So
wanna vote on it
that's going to be recorded in...
Okay.
Can you do it one more time?
Yeah, do it one more time. No?
No, delete, I believe.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
2, yes.
Yes.
Ms. Perry?
Where's Ms. Perry?
Ms. Gretz? Okay.
No against taking that money. I don't know if that was a yes or a no, how to structure the
I
question.
think it was...
You're consistent.
Okay.
I think it was the same vote we had in committee. Same vote.
It was there, the mayor's plan?
Ms. Perry?
She voted yes, I think.
Just give a second here.
That's real, was it?
SPR money is money that's collected from quarantines and all that.
We'll go further to Ms. Perry, we'll come back to that.
Okay. So beginning on page 10, the proposed budget had proposed to do the upfront payment for the Lacers pension contribution at 100% and 3/4 for the fire and police pension system. This recommendation would make the 100%.
Let's go back to special parking revenue on page 9. Ms. Perry's here. Could you record your vote?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so it's 5-2, so the same as the committee report. Yes. Okay, page 10 now.
This deletes the last quarter payment from the general fund, and it has we require the upfront payment to be paid at 100% for both systems. It reflects the roughly $6 million savings to the general fund.
Let me ask you this, what memo do we, so we can document that address the cost savings or the cost of moving that 1/4?
There was a CAO memo, there was a miscellaneous memo number 3 that addressed those costs.
Which one?
That was under the miscellaneous category, is memo number 3.
Number 3. So colleagues, memo number 3 addressed that question under miscellaneous. So we can use that as a reference. Thank you.
Next item is under general services. This is to restore position authority and funding for 6 positions that would provide materials testing support for the street resurfacing program. These are fully reimbursed by the Harbor Department and the airports.
Very happy to see that. Did you find that both the harbor and the airport were cooperative on this? That was our suggestion, that they get involved and make up the tab.
This would be done under an existing memorandum of agreement.
Right. Good. Well, great. Congratulations on making that happen.
Okay. Next item, under Information Technology Agency, this reduces the telecommunications development account transfer to the general fund. So this basically restores funding to the telecommunications development account to continue to provide funding for Channel 36. It also gives the instruction that the committee had requested to look at the funding allocation in that account, take a look at the 60-40 split, and make recommendations on how that can be adjusted for future years.
Needless to say, I'm extremely pleased of the action you all took. You did listen to us on that, and I think every cable subscriber who writes that monthly check is going to appreciate the fact that money is going back into the channel the way it was set up to do historically. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Next item, under personnel, this restores 80 position authorities and funding for the workers' compensation program. It also deletes funding that was included in the Human Resources Benefits Fund for the third-party administrator.
Let me ask, that's the item that we're going to have in committee on the 22nd?
Yes, there's a referral on this as well to have a further discussion on the item.
Okay. Colleagues, this is the item that was originally discussed as to whether there was confusion of these positions either being e-ripped or laid off and the third-party administrator. And so what the expectation is, we're going to have a joint personnel and budget and finance committee meeting on the 22nd to address that prior to the budget coming forward. Yeah.
Next item.
With Monday.
Next item, under police, this is actually a very small change to the sworn hiring plan that would change the classes from 60 to 40. It maintains the officers at 9963, so it's just a small savings in changing the class size.
It's keeping to attrition, correct?
Yes.
That is. Okay, but I have a question. There are other policing authorities in the city, in the county and in the state. Have we done any outreach? I know that the airport police appreciate the LAPD training. I know the harbor police do too. And obviously I accept what we have here. But do we know if there was an outreach by the police department to other policing agencies that might have cadets that could appreciate the fine training that the LAPD does at the academy.
I don't know the answer to that question, either maybe police department or could
I think when we
respond.
discussed this, the police department supported the classes of 40 because it gave them more flexibility to train airport and other city agencies, and certainly makes more space available for other outside agencies. And that was the whole issue of why they supported the classes of 40.
Okay. All right. Just in case that's the case or whatever, I'd like to see the outreach that they're doing to other groups within the region to use our fine academy for training. And if it stays at 40, it stays at 40. We know where we want to be with the LAPD, 9,963 officers, but you got a great academy. And if we can train others there and even get a revenue stream from training others there, it would be worth us at least exploring it. So I'd like an LAPD report back on that one, without changing the dynamic of what we're doing here.
Okay.
Got it.
Next item, under transportation, this is to restore funding and 5 positions for the preferential parking districts, off-street parking districts, and so on. These are fully supported by permit fees. The DOT had provided, or the CAO had provided a memo on this, and the committee had expressed some interest in restoring these positions. The next item is more of a technical adjustment. The budget had the funding source for the Harbor Gateway to ATSAC project funded by Measure R. Funding is available through Proposition 1B, so it recognizes the funding from Proposition 1B and it frees up funding in Measure R. It also included is a recommendation to provide one-time funding for the citation books that would have to be printed for the increased fees.
Let me just ask on that. Could we make sure that is that evaluation for Sunday enforcement, whether that impacts the change in the books, that's incorporated so that we don't produce books and then later find out if we decide to go in that direction that we missed some element of additional weekend enforcement?
Right, that report from DOT should probably take place very, very quickly then.
I understand that DOT issues citations with a computer. If they're issuing it with a computer, why do they need citation books? They have handheld computers where they log the information and a little receipt prints out, which goes in the violator's car. So what are the citation books about?
Councilman, there are some agencies that still utilize the ticket books, such as the airports that write tickets for us. So these are DOT officers that would use the handheld computers, but there are other agencies that actually write parking tickets, and so they actually have an actual book.
So the books are for other than DOT?
That's correct.
And when we print those citations, why can't we leave the amount out and have a sheet where they can write the price in, since the prices can change, instead of all those books that have to now be disposed?
That's something that we will mention to DOT, that's a possibility. However, if you write the price in, that means they probably have to carry the code section to know, what
Is
the
that
pricing are.
difficult to carry the code section?
Maybe it's not, but we will refer that to DOT to consider when they print the ticket books.
Thank you. That used to be the case where they write it in.
And those errors.
Pretty simple.
Okay, any other questions on page 10? Let me ask you on Prop A. There's no mention here, but there was a decision made to basically have a joint meeting on that. Is that going to be dealt with as another part of the report?
Yes, it is.
All right. So, any questions on page 10? So we have a couple of report backs dealing with transportation, dealing with Sunday enforcement, write-in amount on the citation, in addition to the implementation of new citation books. And then I believe that date I mentioned earlier should be May 24th for the joint personnel, budget, and finance dealing with the issue of workers' comp.
clarity on the ITA, which of course is music to my ears. What becomes of the individuals who have worked in that department, staffing Channel 36, that we saw before us early in this process?
This doesn't address the staffing issues, the restoration of funds. It would continue the programming.
I think we said during the committee that it was our intent to after the budget process, is to look at the whole 60/40 and come up with a budget that is more reliable for Channel 35, 36.
Yeah, but remember, we said in point 1, reduce telecommunications and transfer to the general and provide restored funding to the ITA, continue funding Channel 36 programming. So when you take a look at the programming aspect of it and you do come back, I'm expecting that part of it will be personnel out of that 40% that comes out of the dollar, meaning roughly that $8 million that was the 40%. Has an opportunity to function. So,
and that can be part of that report.
And I look forward to that in the report. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on page 10? Okay, thank you.
Then on page 11, the unappropriated balance, what's provided here, that the first item is the partial funding for the restoration of the 16 positions. So when we go back and look at the options for funding, this would be part of that review as well. What this basically did is put in estimated receipts so that if those come in, then it could offset the costs of the animal care shelter. So we'll incorporate that as part of the report back for Monday. The next item is to include funding for anticipated health care costs. This was in the Human Resources Benefits area. The funding for the benefits was underfunded. This puts funding in the unappropriated balance.
And basically, this is funding for the expected increase in costs.
Increase in health care costs, that's correct. Okay. Next item is to reduce the outside counsel line item based on current expenditure patterns. So these are savings. That's the anticipated savings. The next item is to provide funding. There was a discussion regarding volunteer programs at both the Library and Recreation and Parks Department. So what this is to provide some seed money to develop those programs. And so that's been incorporated into the unappropriated balance. When there's also a request for both of those departments to come back with a plan for volunteer programs, then at that point, this money can be appropriated if that's an appropriate thing to do. Next, under another category under other changes, generally these are all items where there's an offsetting cost so that there's no impact to the general fund. So under cultural affairs, this restores funding for special events. This is that $415,000 that was allocated that was taken from special events from cultural affairs and allocated for various items that were previously funded in the general city purposes budget. So what this item does is restore that funding to cultural affairs. It takes it from one place and puts it in another. The next item is under disability. This is the funding for the AIDS coordination program, the HIV testing, which would be funded from block grant funds. Under El Pueblo,
Just want to make sure, just to do a shout out for you and putting that back in. You listened to both Mr. Parks and myself on this particular issue.
And I should also note there was also some discussion about some other funds that are in the current year for that program, and those are there's a contract that's being worked on right now that should be completed this year, and those funds encumbered, so there's no need to take any further action on that.
Great.
Next item under El Pueblo, this recognizes anticipated revenue from rent increases, and it would create an unappropriated balance line item within Schedule 43, which is the El Pueblo fund, and for the anticipated rent revenue. Any expenditures from that fund would require mayor and council approval.
Okay, and also, We have a report back on the issue of their administrative overhead and their deployment of resources.
Yes, there's a report back that would look at their whole management structure, and we can get to that later in the report as well.
Okay. And one of the things, I don't know if you received it, we got a letter this morning from the Vice President of the Commission, and so I'll get that to you so you'll be aware of what their concerns are about the deployment.
Yeah, I haven't seen that one. Next item, under Information Technology Agency, this was a request by the Board of Public Works to restore a fiscal system specialist. They support the financial system for the Board of Public Works. The funding would come from the Sewer Construction and Maintenance Fund. The next item for the Public Works Board, there was also discussion during the committee hearings regarding providing the provision of trash bags for the Business Improvement District Clean and Safe programs. The Board of Public Works had identified bottle bill money, and so this reflects that funding.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions on page 11?
Well, there's one more there, and that's sanitation. It's also funding for an environmentally preferable purchasing program. It's one position, and that would be funded from Solid Waste Resources Revenue Fund.
What is that on page?
That's the bottom of page 11.
The last one I have is dealing with the trash bags on 11. Is there...
Oh, okay. Then that must be on the top of the next page?
Okay. So any questions on page 11? Okay, go to 12.
All right, on page 12, top of the, I talked about the environmentally preferable purchasing program. The next item are two resolution position authorities and funding for the watershed division. These are positions that would be funded by Proposition O. This was a departmental request. There are two engineering positions. The next item is a restoration of 5 position authorities and funding for supply services and general services. These are also fully funded from the Sewer Construction and Maintenance Fund, and this was a request that was made by the department. Next item, transportation. This was a position that was transferred from the Department of Transportation to the Emergency Management Department. This simply moves it back to the Department of Transportation. It's an emergency preparedness coordinator. Under unappropriated balance, this adds regular special investigator position to the fire department for the independent assessor, and it would come from the line item in the unappropriated balance of the fire department professional standards division. It also gives an instruction to the CAO and CLA to reconvene the working group that established the professional standards division and the independent assessor and develop recommendations on expending the funds in the unappropriated balance, but it sets aside funds for those positions.
And then, Karen, could you just reflect what you have on the paper? Having gone through those first several pages, what was the outcome and impact on the reserve fund and the changes of what a dollar amount have we made an impact on?
So I'm sorry, say that again?
In the middle of the page?
Oh, yes. Okay, the net change, that was actually a net increase in the reserve fund of $8 million. So that brings the total reserve fund to $129 million.
And that's our 3%?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Next, under instructions and technical adjustments, under Exhibit H in the budget basically are the implementing instructions to ensure that the budget, the recommendations to implement the budget. Unless you want me to go through every single one of these, basically this cleans it up. It deletes those recommendations that aren't necessary, either because they've been deleted from these recommendations, they'd already been done before by the City Council, they're already actively being considered by the City Council, and therefore we don't need a second instruction. And in some cases, there are items that are referred to committee for further policy discussion.
Okay, and that takes us from page 12 through, what is it, 15?
Yeah, and some of the reports that you had requested are worked in here too. For example, Prop A is in here. Let's see.
Colleagues, on Exhibit H, as Karen said, is more of directions and report backs and things that the committee had instructed. Any questions on Exhibit H that takes us from page 12
to about 16
through page 16? Or early the top of what, 17?
Yeah, there's actually a few, there's some requests that are also incorporated in here. This also includes implementing language for the fee increases, so those are incorporated in here as well.
Any questions on Exhibit H?
16, page 16. On page 16, I had requested in the hearings that parking enforcement being added from DOT to LAPD also in that task force working group. That's not mentioned in the bottom of the page. And then, there's not the bottom of the page.
What was it?
Page 16?
Yeah, with the OPS up in the middle there. So that should go to not just IGS, but that
That
parking
actually
enforcement.
maybe reflected someplace else, but if it's not, we'll make sure it's incorporated
I didn't
here.
see it anywhere else, so make sure that's in there or else someplace else, but that
Right.
was the instruction at the time.
Yes, it was.
And then also, we wanted to see that go to public safety as well, because PD is a public safety committee.
There's a separate attachment that has some other referrals that may be in there.
Okay.
We can run through that. If
That's in
not,
the-
we'll make sure that it's incorporated.
That was in the committee instructions.
Yes, it
I didn't
was.
see that, so, okay, we'll make sure they match. Okay.
Right. Okay. Then, let's see. On page 17, these are also various instructions to departments. For example, and these have been discussed as part of the committee hearings, and are, in some cases, are instructions that are done pretty much every year to ensure that invoicing and all grant reimbursements are done as quickly as possible, to ensure that the city attorney and CAO work with departments that have high liability payouts. It also gives the instruction to remove all the asset restructuring items from the reserve fund. There was $167 million included in the reserve fund for that. It authorizes the CAO and CLA to make minor technical adjustments. So many of these are routine instructions just to enable the budget to move forward. Then, under technical adjustments, these are a few things that were discussed sometime during the hearings. Under city clerk, we'll start there. There was a request with regard to the election positions to provide an unfreeze for those positions during the election year. When there is an election year, typically positions are unfrozen so that the city clerk can move to hire the positions that are necessary without coming back. There are thousands of positions that are hired for each election cycle. This would provide a hiring freeze through February of 2011 if there's only the primary election, and through April if there's a general election. So it gives them that authority for the time that they would need to hire. And it would require that any full-time positions would be on a transfer-only basis, consistent with the management hiring committee practice.
Just curious, I don't see it anywhere listed, is what becomes of the neighborhood councils. I'm assuming that their funding of $45,000 is in place. Is that the case?
That hasn't been changed.
So it will continue to be that? According to the
Their recommendations, these are changes to the mayor's proposed budget, so that remained intact.
Very good, thank you.
Also for the city clerk, they'd also requested to be exempted from furlough. They had indicated that they could do that within existing election year funding, and so this would provide that exemption on the same kind of a basis so that they have that flexibility during the election cycle. And the next item under Community Development Department, this is to instruct the department and the CAO to review CDD's resolution position authorities and determine which authorities have a reliable funding source and can be considered for regularization. This was part of the discussion about having resolution authorities for a long time. I think there was a look to see which ones really are permanent and make those corrections. So this would be a report back.
And I think for the CAO, one of the things that just is a concern, when we have those resolution authorities offline for a number of years, we treat them significantly different than cutting the regular budget. In fact, and it's just the reverse of what their intent was, that they were intended to be created for a short period of time for a unique program, but yet they're offline and they just have a life of their own. And so, you know, it kind of creeps up to where this year we're approaching, I think, 1,300 or 1,400. I'm less concerned on the ones that deal with general fund special funds or grants. But the general funds, we really need to look at them, because if we had regularized them in years past, they would be on the chopping block like any other position in the budget. And so we should really look at that and see how many of those can be absorbed. And when I say absorbed, the work function absorbed in those departments, and we can relieve the general fund of those resolution authorities.
We'll do that.
The next item under the Community Development Department is to instruct CDD to provide training and education to the neighborhood councils within budgeted resources. That was a request by the committee.
Thank you.
The next item under the Convention Center is to restore one regular authority of a painter position. This was a position that was inadvertently omitted from the budget, so and funding is already available for that, so this is a technical adjustment. Similarly, for the fire department, this restores funding and position authority for a welder in the supply and maintenance division. And the fire department had indicated that they would be willing to delete 2 other positions to offset that funding.
Very good, and I appreciate again the flexibility of the city staff and the fire department on that particular issue was a real important one, and I appreciate everybody worked that out. Thank you.
Under general city purposes, this reappropriates funding for the special fund fee subsidy reimbursement account and Feria del Libro. In both cases, there's current year funding that can be reappropriated to the 2010-11 fiscal year. So that would continue funding for those in the next year. Under general city general services.
Let me just ask one question on this fee subsidy. That's not the citywide, that's the...
This is the special fund, the special funds. The citywide is part of the...
Okay, but let me just ask, now, when we reallocate those for next year, are we going to reallocate them equally because those funds have been spent differently?
Those were restored as part of the elected official restructuring.
I know, but I'm just saying how we're going to apportion them. Is it that we reallocate and then equally distribute?
Any unspent funds that remain in your account would reappropriate. This amount would be the 2010-11 allocation, which is reflected not in this section, this is a different item, but what you're referring to is another line item that would set aside $900,000 for the citywide events, and then an equal portion of I don't recall the exact amount, but an equal portion, I think it's $90,000 for special events within districts.
Very good, thank you.
Under general services, this is a restoration of 10 positions in the Office of Public Safety. It's offset by the deletion of 10 other authorities, and general services will determine which those are, and we'll get those resolved.
Can we, while we're still on page 18, go back to the top on the instructions to the treasurer, CEO, and controller on interfund borrowing? Can we just add that any such actions will be noticed to the Budget and Finance Committee, so just we know that you're doing it? I think we need to know that these fund transfers are being made at least.
Yes.
Issue of the general services, the 10 positions, there's been discussion about merging with the Los Angeles Police Department. With that in mind, why are we going to proceed hiring 10 folks when
This is just swapping out position authorities. These are authorities that they feel that are more important that they need as opposed to other authorities. There's a separate recommendation in this report that would look at that merger, and that would be a report back, so they would consider all these. These are already regular position authorities they have. Some were deleted, and this is just a swap.
Not additional.
Pardon me?
It's not additional. Not additional. This
Not
is a
additional,
swap.
no. This is an exchange, right?
Okay.
The next item under police is to restore position.
Colleagues, any question on page 18?
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because I don't see it anywhere within the mix of stuff, and we've been moving rather fast. What happened to the fee charge for people using City Hall, the 160,000 freebies that we get a year?
That's actually a recommendation for them to look at that further and bring a report back on that.
When?
The committee can determine how quickly you'd like to have that back.
Well, I thought we were moving in a direction on that, so what's your sensing of how much time you need to report back on that?
You know, I think we could probably schedule that for the second meeting after we finish the budget. But I think, again, we need the insight in that report as to who's actually being charged. And I think that's what, I think, to look at the larger picture, because my concern, and I understand it's a revenue source, but I'm concerned that if you invite people down for your Friday morning award ceremonies, that you're going to be, that's the people you'll be charging, are people that you're inviting down, your meetings or meetings within committees.
Right.
So,
These would be for people who don't currently pay for parking. They're guests of the city, guests of council members for meetings and so on.
General service officers, are you still planning to lay them off? The 16 general service officers?
There are still position deletions within the general services department, yes.
It just gets down to 6 then, because of the 10.
Right.
So it's really 6.
But it swaps them out.
this item drops it to 6.
Right. They had requested 16, this gets 10.
Yeah, the sworn are 16, right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. Page 18. Okay, look, when we get back in a couple of weeks after regular budget thing, get all that together, and I'm not giving up on charging to come to City Hall, even those we're honoring, and everybody else, somebody's got to pay for something. And secondly, I don't want to get rid of sworn officers if they have value within the mix of things. So I know we're not going to just do everything in a minute and a half when July 1 hits, but I do expect a report back that gives us some way out of the tea leaves here on this.
Right, and as I indicated, there is an instruction in here a little bit later about looking at that whole issue.
Good, great, thank you.
Okay. Under the police department, this restores position authority for roughly 6 positions that were inadvertently deleted from the proposed budget who left during ERIP. I believe the police department is still working on identifying which positions those are. So again, this is just to restore positions that were deleted that probably should not have been. Under Public Works, this restores position authority for 2 positions to support the equal opportunity and enforcement and centralized certification, and this is funded within existing funds. Under sanitation, this is also an exchange of positions. It deletes 46 vacant positions and restores 45, so it's also a funding no net cost. And similarly for the environmental, these are 2 position authorities that were part of the transfer of the Environmental Affairs Department. These were also inadvertently left out of the proposed budget, so those are proposed to be restored. And in both cases, the sanitation had indicated some interest in this, and there were memos on at least one of them. And the last item on that is under the zoo, is to restore position authority for a truck operator. This was also inadvertently deleted from the budget. Then we have attachments, and these are various committee referrals and requests for reports. Going through the committee referrals, the first item to the Audits and Governmental Efficiency Committee is the Controller's report on cost-saving ideas from audits. The Controller had submitted a report, and there was also a memo on the subject that would be referred to committee. To the Budget and Finance Committee, the Controller's memorandum on the cost allocation plan. There was also some interest in looking at those cap rates and how they're figured and if those are appropriate cap rates. So there was some additional information that was requested for that. The next is the discussion of best management practices and a discussion with general managers regarding the management of their budgets. That was like several general managers had come in and said, give me a budget, I can manage it. This would provide a forum for that discussion. To the Information Technology and Governmental Affairs and Budget and Finance Committees, this was a departmental memo from General Services where 2 of the items were already incorporated in the recommendations here, and there were 3 others that were regarding the street resurfacing program that were suggested to go to committee for consideration. For the Public Safety Committee, Mr. Smith, here's the recommendation on the Office of Public Safety and the traffic officers. So that's incorporated there.
And I'd like to add an additional to that committee, or I guess you'd call it the task force rather than the committee itself, and that would be that the LAPD report back on critical civilian positions necessary to main legal requirements. There is some indication that there are some civilian positions that are not sworn that are slowing up processes that we have to report certain things in a legal time frame or to get cases to the DA within a legal time frame for statutory requirements. So we need to know what those positions are to maintain that chain of custody for evidence as well as criminal cases filing. So we'll have them report back to us.
Great. To the Transportation Committee, there were 2 memos from the CAO regarding the Department of Transportation, one regarding the impacts to franchise and taxi cab regulations.
Let me just ask one thing. Mr. Zion has another permit. Why don't we move this CLA report while he's here, we get the votes on it, and then we can continue on the referrals afterwards. So, colleagues, other than the 2 items we voted on already, I'm going to ask that we move the CLA's report in total with these recommendations to council for Friday.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple items that I'd like to bring up that aren't part of the discussion we've had so far.
We can add those. I'm saying we want to get the vote before Mr. Zine leaves, and so if you have something that is addition to the report, we can certainly address those after we move the report.
Well, they'd be of significance, but I guess we could cast one round of voting and then add some very significant
if you have
items
something to
after.
add, we'll certainly address that before we leave, but we just want to get the report addressed before he leaves. Any other questions?
Yeah, very specific.
Koretz's concerns are just as important, Mr. Zine leaving. I would like to hear what Mr. Koretz has to say. It's I have concerns with this as well. I disagree with the decimation we're doing to our libraries. I disagree with the, closing our child care facilities. I'm just not quite sure how I could express that and vote no.
Vote no on the report, then.
Vote no on the whole report.
If that's you're inclined to do that.
Well, I think what Mr. Koretz is trying to do is say, hey, I may want to vote for the report. There's just a few items, if I heard you correctly, that I...
They're big items, but yes.
Okay, but I think we went page by page on every item, and everyone had an opportunity to address the item they had a concern about. So if it's not in this report, we've not altered the mayor's report, so you'll get a chance to address the mayor's report on Monday, but we're talking about what the CLA, the changes to the report.
But if we vote for the CLA's report, it's incorporating the mayor's report, those items that were not changed.
That's right.
So there's some items in the mayor's report that I
think you could address those on Monday, so the thing is, because we're not voting in the sense of item by item on the mayor's report, we're saying we're taking this in total about the changes.
But when it comes to the council floor, it's a whole new budget, and the CLA report is going to be incorporated with the mayor's report. It's a whole new budget, so we vote for it here. It's as if we agreed with whatever comes to the council floor.
Yeah. The thing is, what do you want to disagree with in the mayor's budget?
Well, I would like to hear what Mr. Koretz has to say, and I have some other items too that I'd like to...
Mr. Chair, if we could take those particular, the reason I have to leave is
Yeah, no.
there's a hospital opening in my district, and I need to be there for the hospital opening. I'm supposed to be there at 5 o'clock. The issue that Mr. Koretz has, if we could just take those items out.
They're pretty big items.
Well, whatever, how big or small, but whatever page they're on, and just separate those and then vote on the rest of the issues, we can do that.
Well, there are three issues. Additional taxes, which I don't think we've really discussed as part of this. Layoffs and the fire department budget.
The additional taxes in the mayor's budget? Are you offering them as new taxes?
Yes.
Above and beyond? So that's something we can take up outside of the report, because they're not in the mayor's report, they're not in this report. So you can offer them up to ask the CAO to report back on them.
The items that are in this report, are there any other items in this particular report that we just reviewed?
The layoffs that are present and the modified fire scheduling.
Okay, so we could pull those out, Mr. Chair, and vote on everything other than those?
On the modified, you're talking about the modified scheduling?
Yes.
Okay. And what page is that on, Karen?
There's no, we've
There's
not
no mention,
addressed
that's part of the mayor's
That's
budget?
part of the mayor's proposed budget, so this would not change what the mayor proposed on that.
All right. Anything else?
I would like to pull out rec and parks and libraries and vote on everything else, and
The rec and park and libraries are in the mayor's report or in the CLA report?
in the mayor's report.
Okay, so let's just do this. We do it very easily. You're concerned about the rec and park in general? Okay,
Yes.
so if the committee supports the current mayor's report on rec and park, we can now vote on the rec and park entry that's in the mayor's report. So, Mr. Rizar?
With the changes that...
Whatever changes they made on this. Mr. Rizar on rec and parks?
Yeah, no.
Okay?
Yes.
Yes?
I just want to know what you're talking about right now, Mr. Rizzo.
To do a voice vote, you should say Mr. Zine, so, you know, the record reflects there's no visual record of this, so we have to know
We
who's
have it on
voicing.
tape.
Yeah. Mr. Weezer, what are you talking about in Rec and Park that we
I'm
need to
talking about
focus on?
the closure of child care facilities, and I disagree with that. I think we don't have a plan on what we're going to do with those existing facilities, and it's going to affect over 1,000 families in this city. We had an opportunity to get creative about possibly doing a scale fee-based system. I didn't see any creativity from this city trying to do anything to save those child care facilities. I think it's a disgrace, and I just want to register my no vote. We could get creative and do something else, but I'm just going to vote no and not belabor the point here.
All right, are you satisfied with the answer? Yeah. Okay, let's go with the child care rec and park on the mayor's budget and any amendments in the CLA's report. Mr. Weezer?
No.
Mr. Zine? This is on child care in the mayor's report.
I'm supporting the committee report.
Okay.
The CLA's report.
Yes. Mr. Smith, Bernard Parks, yes.
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Perry.
Yes.
Mr. Koretz.
No.
Okay, so we have a 5-2 on child care as reported by the mayor. Is there any other issues, Mr. Rizar?
Any impacts on libraries?
Okay, on libraries as far as hours and days of operation. So
Any impacts on libraries?
any impact on libraries? So
Yes.
we'll add libraries in the mayor's report and any amendments by this report, and we'll have a voice vote. Mr. Rizar?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Smith, yes. Mr. Zine, yes. Parks, yes.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Rosenthal. Ms. Perry?
Yes.
Mr. Koretz?
No.
Okay, we have a 5-2 on supporting the mayor's report on library hours and other issues and any amendments that are in the CLA's report. Mr. Rizal, you have any other items
I
besides those
don't have
two?
any other items. I do have a comment, and, you know, we've gone through this process. I understand that it's one of the most difficult years we've had to go through, but at the same time, it's about setting priorities, and I guess we have different priorities, and that's how I see us voting and move forward. It's not that I'm not recognizing the tough financial situation when we just have different priorities.
Mr. Koretz.
On the fire department deployment, I would...
You're asking on the modified deployment?
On the modified deployment, I would look to the direction of the memo from the CAO, LAFD memo number 3, which suggests that we look at, among other things, elimination of staff assistants, closures of 10 BLS ambulances, and elimination of 10th members at up to 18 task force stations. There are several other things that I would suggest to minimize reaching that whole dollar figure, but while I suspect fire department management would dislike a piece of that, I suspect some of the rank and file would dislike another piece of it. I think when you add it all up, it probably has less of a negative impact on the department than having a modified coverage plan.
Let me ask, CLA and CAO, is the issue that's been brought to us on the substitutes for the managed hiring, is that a report back?
It should be a report back, because any changes in the fire department budget would actually impact other aspects of the fire department budget and could actually unravel portions of it. So I would suggest a report back on those fire department issues.
Yeah. So the issue is that it's nothing we can resolve today because we haven't vetted the numbers to determine what the financial impact.
That's correct.
Okay, so we asked for a report back on those 3 items versus the managed hiring.
Councilman, what you could do also, I understand Mr. Koretz's point, which is he doesn't necessarily agree with the modified coverage plan. What could be adopted is the actual reduction amount, which is roughly $41 million, and then the way it would be implemented would come back to you. So that's the report back. So you would move forward with the actual reduction within the budget, which keeps the budget in balance, and then the report back would be how that reduction would be facilitated.
Okay. Mr. Koretz, does that cover your issue?
Yeah, that makes sense. The dollar figure doesn't change.
So we agree on the mayor's in the CLA report to reduce the fire department's budget by $41 million and ask for a report back from the CAO as to how that $41 million will be covered. Okay? Is that captured it?
Yes.
Okay, do we need to vote on that? Is that consensus?
Consensus. Yeah, I think
okay, so we're consensus. Any other issues?
The only issue, and it's obviously a substantial one, is the issue of layoffs. I mean, I've seen several different items of analysis that show us anywhere from paying several $1 million for the pleasure of laying off the entire number of coalition members to a modest loss, but any which way, it seems like for the amount of services we'd be talking about, that to have somewhere between a modest expenditure and a modest savings, laying off coalition members doesn't seem like it makes any sense.
Let me just say, Mr. Koretz, before we go on that, I think the report done a week and a half ago by the CAO outlines line for line as it relates to the coalition's budget as to what the real dollars, and then very recently, we would ask the CAO to share this with you, the overall spreadsheet as to the dollars and cents as it relates to layoffs versus furloughs. And so I think once you read that, you may have a different perspective as to the real dollar value.
Well, the most recent information I have is that terminating 551 coalition employees would save the city about $8 million.
I think you have dated information, because I think the CAO has significantly improved information.
If I could also add, I think that given the CLA recommendation to add an additional 1,000 positions, the first task that we'll have to do is work with the general managers to identify those positions and then establish what percentage of those positions are currently filled and will result in layoffs. So the number that was established in the mayor's budget, now that it's being recommended differently by the CLA, will dramatically change. We don't know what that number is right now, but we know that it's going to increase as a result of, assuming that that action moves forward.
And I think from prior conversations, the mayor has the 700-plus numbers in his budget. There's a possibility that several dozen of those might find special fund jobs or proprietary. The likelihood, clear likelihood, is that the bulk of the 700 will not find jobs, will end up in layoffs. And it's clearly apparent that the 1,000 that the CLA report is adding, that they are clearly layoffs, because we will not exhaust the prior 730 or 40.
The mayor's budget went through an exhaustive process to identify as many vacant budgeted positions as possible. So there's currently a very large number of positions that are budgeted, that are being recommended for elimination. So I think it's fair to sort of establish that of the additional 1,000, a significant portion would actually have an individual in those positions.
Yeah, and I think also we commented earlier was that the positions that are in special funds and are proprietary, if they are like CDD, if they cost the general fund dollars, or if you have to raise a fee to create a position, those are not part of the overall equation.
With regard to the vacancies that have been reported on special funds, what's a key issue to understand is that not every one of those positions is a funded position. And so if they're filled, it could create a structural problem on the part of those special funds.
That's right.
So that's something that has to be kept in mind. That also applies to, like, for example, block grant funding. If vacant positions are looked to be filled, it has to be ensured that it doesn't exceed the administrative cap, which would then result in those positions only being funded by the general fund. So there are issues that have to be balanced out. With the additional position eliminations of 1,000, part of what needs to be done in the next few weeks is to identify those positions for elimination and then to begin to prepare layoff lists. And as we indicated earlier, not every position elimination necessarily results in a layoff, but that's what still needs to be calculated.
Okay. Let me get back in the sense of we've covered the two issues for Mr. Huizar, the report back to Mr. Koretz dealing with the issue of the 41 million, and the report back as to the new information that's been created for layoffs. Absent those four items, then we can basically have a vote to approve the current report from the CLA as amended and ask for a voice vote. Mr. Huizar.
Mr. Chair, I don't know if we've actually dealt with the layoffs appropriately.
If you read the information that he's produced, you can certainly bring it up on Monday if you disagree with it.
Well,
yeah. So, I mean,
I disagree with the concept of layoffs in this budget.
The issue is the concept of layoffs is part of balancing the budget. You can vote no against the report. That's very simple.
Can we not pull that concept out in some way?
No, I think otherwise you have a $60 million hole. So if you have some recommendations on filling $60 million, we could listen to that, but if you don't, that's the only way to fill the $60 million.
Parking structures.
Mr. Koretz, we are required by charter to have a balanced budget. And if you pull that out, then it's not a balanced budget, unless you can provide us with $60 million of money to fill the hole.
I'd put in the parking structures and $7 million from...
That's not real money. That's not money in hand. That's not money.
Yeah. That's why we took it out. It was not deemed to be money.
It's not a balanced budget.
Well, from everything I've heard, it seems very likely that it happens. I think it's probably as solid as many of the things in our budget.
I think the issue is if it happens, we'd be glad to have it into our stability account or some other account. But the issue is until it happens, we can't count it, and we chose not to. And it's in the UB, sitting there waiting for it to come in. So we can vote yes or no on up or down on the report.
You're going to follow, you're going to ask for us to put back the parking structures and reduce the layoffs?
I would ask that we do that we put back the parking structures, take $7 million from our surplus and offset the layoffs that way.
I'll second that.
We have Mr., bringing back the fake money that we'll ask.
No, Mr. Parks, let me, come on, there's a difference of opinion here, and I think the
No, it's not a difference
CAO
of opinion.
and the
You can't
mayor's,
spend it.
I think the CAO and the mayor's office first proposed that because it's a judgment call.
No, it's not a judgment call.
We have adopted budgets in the
The money
past,
doesn't exist,
whereas
Mr. Rezar.
there's a future action by this
Mr.
council.
Rezar, the money doesn't exist.
And he's done that before.
Okay, it's in the UB.
And they wouldn't be in there, and other people,
That's not true.
legitimate financial analysts of the city wouldn't have proposed it if they didn't believe it's
Mr. Rezar, we have a $100 million hole in the budget.
It's a judgment call. It's
Okay,
a judgment
so,
call.
no, it's not a judgment call. You can spend that judgment, we can't. So let's go with the issue on the money. Mr. Rezar.
All right, for Mr. Karetz's motion, yes.
Okay. No? No. Mr. Smith, no. No, Mr. Parks?
No.
No, Mr. Rosenthal? No. No, Mr. Perry? So we have a 5-2 on not bringing back the money that we took out the first day of the report. So any other issue? Now, let's vote on the entire report on that issue. Mr. Rezar?
Fulfilling my charter obligation duty, yes.
Okay. Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Parks, yes?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Perry?
That was funny.
Mr. Koretz?
Yes.
All right, so now we can go back to the committee reports, now that we've dealt with those amendments.
Okay, I'll leave it to you. Do you want me to go through each one individually?
The issue is, I think, if you just summarize those that are most significant.
Sure. Okay, let me just go to the requested reports. There are several reports for animal services regarding adoption, funding for, using the funding for sterilizing feral cats, building and safety. This is the analysis of consolidating inspection services. These are all requested reports by the committee. The CAO has a number of different reports here, involving the water and power budget, oversight of grants, citywide use of volunteers and the impact on employee relations issues, reporting back on redevelopment areas, looking at fleet operations. Actually, that was in committee, in council this morning. There's some additional instructions there. To look at a financial policy regarding the FAA and state tidelands pre-approvals. An instruction to provide a status report on the Department of Economic Development. There was a request for the city clerk to look at consolidation of municipal elections with county run elections, with community development, looking at the neighborhood council funding program as in the feasibility of contracting with fiscal administrators, to report on the public safety committee on the options to fund the police student worker program with Workforce Investment Act funding. Let's see, we kind of jump around and pick out some of the more pertinent ones. The request for the controller and CAO to look at cap rates is included here. Some various requests from the Office of Finance on web efficiencies, offering compromise program, and so on. For fire, to look at replicating the county's use of private ambulances for secondary transport. For general services, this is the report looking at the charging for guest parking. And for ITA, looking at the incorporating an accounts receivable component into the FMS system. For personnel, instructing them to prepare memos on the status of employees transferring to general fund positions, and the report back on workers' compensation. There was also a request for, I believe it was Bureau of Engineering, to look at flood maps in the city. And then the Special Parking Revenue Fund, there was look at the SPRF structure where, with vis-à-vis professional and overnight parking districts. So that's just a general summary. If there are others that were requested, those could certainly be added.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Any additional referrals or for the committee reports that on the last attachment? If not, let me ask the CAO or CLA any additional information we need to move forward, any instructions that we need to give for Friday's meeting.
After today, what we'll do is we'll prepare the committee report reflecting your actions today. That'll be ready for council on Friday. The committee report will be introduced, and you'll have the public hearing, and then it'll go to the full council on Monday.
So Friday, we'll have it open up for public hearing, and then...
And introduce
the report itself.
That's correct.
Okay, and then on Monday, we start at 9 o'clock, and once we had the public hearing on Friday, do we then come back to public hearing on Monday?
If you open and close the public hearing on Friday, you do not have to have a public hearing on Monday.
Colleagues, any questions about the process between now and Friday or for next Monday?
Yes, Mr. Parks. There will be a minority report for those items that were voted upon that did not receive a majority, correct?
We can do that.
Can you please prepare a minority report? Thank you.
Okay, so those are the items. So we have adopted the report with the amendments, and we have accepted the attachments. And so if there are no other instructions to the CLA, then we will now adjourn. We're going to adjourn the meeting to come for Friday's council meeting. Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience during this period, and thanks the staff, Lorraine's last meeting in the budget.
What?
She is retiring. And I want to say, for all of her efforts keeping the...
You can't eat that.
I want to say thank you for all your efforts every Monday, being there each and every Monday and keeping us on the straight and narrow.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
But let me say thanks to the CAO staffs, the mayor's office, and all of the committee members, and Jerry and Karen. Karen's first budget. It's act like...
Very good, Karen.
And thank you very much to Sharon and Monique and everybody here. Thank you very much. Jerry Miguel, I did that.
And Jose?
And Jose. On Friday starts at 9.